Hi there, I'm Annalise. I built a $13 million business, quietly on my own, thinking maybe one day my family would just be proud. Instead, at Thanksgiving dinner, my sister exposed it to the whole room. And that was just the beginning. They didn't just want congratulations, they wanted access, control, money. Then came the fake job requests, credit card fraud, even a family meeting to guilt trip me into funding my sister's dream business. But the worst part? They planned it all, weeks before I even walked through that door. What happens when your success becomes a target and the people aiming are your own family? The air in Coeur d'Alene always smelled like pine and frozen lake water, especially in late November. The familiar crunch of gravel under my boots should have made me feel something, nostalgia maybe, but it didn't. Not anymore. The town hadn't changed, but I had. And now even my shadow felt out of place. When I stepped up to my mother's porch that morning, no one opened the door. I stood there for a moment, hand half raised, before turning the knob and letting myself in. The scent of stuffing and reheated gravy lingered in the air. Briley's boyfriend Milo lounged on the living room couch with his feet up, glued to a football game. He barely looked up. "Hey," he muttered, not taking his eyes off the screen. "They're in the kitchen." No hug, no welcome home, just that. I set my bag down, adjusted the scarf around my neck, and walked into a house I used to call mine. But even the floorboards didn't creak the same. Mom stood at the counter stirring cranberry sauce, humming something off-key. Briley was flipping through a binder of color palettes, likely another business idea she wouldn't follow through with. Dad was nowhere in sight. I guessed he'd retreated to the garage, his sanctuary during every holiday. "Oh, you're here," Mom said without turning. "We didn't expect you till later." I glanced at the clock. "It's noon." She shrugged, too busy arranging deviled eggs to make eye contact. I noticed a stack of photo prints on the table, balloons, banners, cake, and paused. Briley caught my look and smiled proudly. "Oh, those. That was last weekend. My graduation party." "Graduation party?" I blinked. "You graduated?" "Interior design certificate. It's online, but still counts," she said with a toss of her hair. "The whole family came. Even Aunt Diane drove in from Spokane. It was a blast." I turned to Mom. "No one told me." She wiped her hands on a towel and said, "We figured you were busy with whatever you do, traveling, working with those antique people. We didn't want to bother you." I swallowed back the sour taste creeping up my throat. "Bother me?" Briley added, "I posted all the pics, didn't you see? Maybe you're not following my new account." Maybe I wasn't. Or maybe I stopped checking years ago when it became clear that family gatherings happened with or without me. Dinner was as silent as a church during confession. The table was full, cousins, in-laws, even a neighbor or two, but no one asked me about my work, my life, or anything beyond the obligatory, "How's the weather in Milwaukee?" Then it happened. Uncle Rich raised his glass and said, "To Annalise, always so composed, never a hair out of place, always got it together." I smiled politely, ready to down my wine and move on, but Briley's eyes brimmed with tears. "You don't know what it's like," she said, voice cracking, "to fail over and over again while your sister just wins at everything." Forks froze midair. Conversations died. The room tilted. Briley covered her face and sobbed. "I've tried, I really have, but nobody sees how hard it is for me to just keep up." Mom rushed to her side. "Oh, sweetheart, you're doing your best." Dad had reappeared just in time to frown in my direction. The implication was clear. I had caused this. My success was an attack. My composure, a weapon. Later I slipped away upstairs, desperate for a few minutes of silence. My old room still smelled faintly of peppermint and dust. The walls were bare now, stripped of the posters and awards that once lined them. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out my laptop to check a few emails. It was automatic, mechanical, something to remind me who I really was outside this house. A notification popped up from Instagram. Briley had posted a photo of herself, smiling, radiant, and around her neck was the Edwardian necklace I'd spent months sourcing and customizing for our mother's 60th, a rare, pale sapphire set in antique gold. The caption read, "Mom said I've always deserved the beautiful things in life." I stared at the screen, the blood draining from my face. That necklace had been wrapped in tissue paper, tied with a note that said, "For everything you sacrificed, Mom." She'd barely glanced at it the day I gave it to her. Now it sparkled on Briley's throat like it had always belonged there. Downstairs I heard them laughing. Someone turned up the music. The sound muffled, but that didn't dull its sting. I closed the laptop, set it aside, and leaned back against the headboard. The room felt smaller than I remembered, or maybe I'd just grown past it. I thought of the time I won first place at the state science fair in 7th grade, came home holding the trophy like it was gold. Mom had glanced at it, said, "That's nice," then turned to help Briley tie her shoelaces. Invisible. That was always my role in this house, the one who didn't need attention, the one who had it all together. I didn't cry. That part of me shut down a long time ago. Instead, I logged into my company's client portal and approved an appraisal report for a collection being prepped for a Manhattan exhibit. My name, Annalise Hayes, flashed in the digital signature. It grounded me. A second notification came in, an email. The sender, Briley. Subject, "Can you take a quick look at my resume? I need it for this job I'm applying to." Right beneath it, another. From Dad. Subject, "We need to talk. About family." I didn't answer either email. Just shut the laptop, left it on the nightstand, and lay back on the bed. The house was still, except for the TV downstairs humming with some holiday rerun. Laughter floated up through the floorboards. My door was closed, but I could still feel the house pressing in. Hours passed, like water slipping down glass. I must have dozed off in my jeans because I woke to my phone buzzing just after midnight. Dad. I stared at the screen, debating. But habit wins over reason sometimes, and a small part of me still wanted to hear something kind, so I picked up. "You're awake," he said. "Barely." "No. How are you? No happy Thanksgiving." He got to the point. "Your sister's struggling. You know that, don't you?" I stayed quiet. "She's trying. Not everyone's wired like you. You've got a head for numbers. Some people don't get handed that." "Handed?" He kept going. "Just don't let your success turn you cold. That's not what family's about. You're not better than us because your life looks nice on paper." My jaw clenched. "I never said I was." "You didn't have to." Then came the dagger. "You've changed, Annalise." Click. I lay there afterward, heart pounding louder than the wind tapping the window. Not angry, just scraped raw, like someone rubbed sandpaper over the softest parts of me, then blamed me for bleeding. I didn't sleep much after that. By morning, I was already up, brushing my teeth with a dusty travel kit. I tossed my hair in a bun, skipped makeup, and opened the laptop again, more reflex than intention. Briley's email was still there. Subject, "Resume help message. Hey, can you take a look before I send it to this studio in Spokane? Thanks." 3. Attachment. Briley final maybe it .docs. I clicked. It was a mess. Typos. Half-finished bullet points. One line read, "Did interior design stuff with mood boards." Another said, "Event planning? Not sure. Ask Mom." Then I saw it. She claimed she worked at Sugar Pines Bakery. That was my old job at 13. Even used my boss's name. It wasn't a real request. It was bait. A guilt trap. I didn't respond. Just saved the file in a folder labeled "Emotional Leverage Archived" and closed the laptop again. Downstairs I poured lukewarm tea. Mom and Briley had gone to get pies. Store-bought, apparently. From the den, I overheard Aunt Diane on the phone. "Well, Wanda says Annalise is too into her career to find a decent man. You know how these women get. Independent, controlling. I mean, she's pushing 35. Laughter followed. I stood still, mug in hand. Mom walked in, holding a grocery receipt. She noticed my face but didn't flinch. "I told her you wouldn't mind," she said casually. "Just wanted them to understand your lifestyle. Not everyone gets your choices." "My choices?" She shrugged. "You know, work first. It's your path, but people talk." I set the mug down, untouched. No fire in me. Just that weight again. Not shame, just clarity. They weren't embarrassed by me. They were embarrassed for me. Back in my room, I sat on the floor, surrounded by the past. Old trophies, crayon cards Briley made when we were kids. This house had always chosen her, quietly but clearly. So, why did I come back? I told myself it was Thanksgiving. that I owed them. But deep down, I'd hoped, foolishly, that maybe this year would be different, that I wouldn't feel like an outsider in my own family. I checked the Spokane bus schedule. There was a 4:45 p.m. departure the next day. I hovered over the ticket button, but I didn't click. Not because I had hope, but because I was done running. I needed to see this through. Not for closure, just for truth. I wanted to see who they really were when I stopped making it easy to ignore me. Later that evening, while scrolling notifications, I got a ping from Venmo. Caitlin, $150, asterisk. Just a lil help, queen. You got it. Asterisk, I blinked. Then a message popped up. Your mom said you'd help. I stared at Caitlin's Venmo request for 5 full minutes, hoping it might disappear. It didn't. $150. Just a lil help, queen. You got it. Like we were close. Like she hadn't ghosted every birthday message for the past 5 years. And now she wanted money. For what exactly? I didn't respond. Didn't decline either. Just left it there like a splinter I wasn't ready to dig out. Morning crawled in behind the blinds, cold and gray. That Idaho kind of morning where caffeine feels medicinal. I could hear dishes downstairs, someone humming, probably Mom. I grabbed my phone, 4 new emails, none of them work. The first was from a cousin in Montana I hadn't seen since Briley's 6th grade recital. Hey cuz, starting a candle brand. Long story LOL. Aunt Wanda said you might want to invest? Even like $2K? The next was from my uncle's stepson, the same guy who once called me emotionally constipated at a barbecue. Yo, you're the rich one, right? Need like $300 to finish building my gaming setup. Help a brother out? My hands didn't shake from rage, just disbelief. No one was even pretending anymore. At some point, someone had drawn a $sign on my forehead, and I hadn't seen it happen. I splashed cold water on my face in the bathroom. The mirror reflected tired eyes. But what hit me harder was the restraint staring back. Years of swallowing it all down. In the hallway, I passed Briley. Leggings, oversized college hoodie she never earned. Her phone screen lit up, and I caught a glimpse. A photo of my office. She'd visited 2 summers ago. I'd regretted it since. By the time I checked Instagram, the post was already live. At @Bri_babe. Some people are just born into things, huh? #blessed #aesthetic goals. There it was. My desk, my cataloged antique brooches, my bookshelf. She knew the angle, the light. And the comments? Worse. Must be nice having a rich sister. She's probably never struggled. Where do I apply to be adopted? I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just walked, quietly, into the living room where she was scrolling next to the dog, giggling. Why are you posting pictures of my office? She blinked. What? You know what? The photo, the caption, the comments. Why? She shrugged. It's just a post. Chill. People like aspirational stuff. You always liked attention. There's a difference between being seen and being used. Before she could answer, Mom stepped in from the kitchen, drying her hands. Oh, Anne, maybe it's her way of showing love. This is how people connect now. Everything's shared. I looked at her. Not everything. I turned and walked away. No drama, just silence. That kind of calm always irritated them more. Upstairs, I opened my laptop. I needed something solid. Emails, spreadsheets, anything real. Instead, a fraud alert. New credit card opened in my name. Chase Sapphire preferred. I froze. I hadn't opened anything new. I logged in. My info was all there, address, SSN, full name. Transactions going back 6 weeks. Sephora, Apple, Pottery Barn, a boutique in Spokane. Every city Briley had tagged on social. I called the bank. The agent was polite, then puzzled. Ma'am, the account wasn't fraudulently created. It was opened in your name, and someone was added as an authorized user. Application came from an IP address in Idaho. It wasn't identity theft. It was identity hijacking. I ended the call and just sat there. Let the quiet land like ash around me. This wasn't sibling rivalry. It wasn't petty family drama. It was crossing a line. They'd stepped into my life with muddy shoes and expected gratitude for the footprints. And still, I hadn't left. Then came the voicemail. Grandma Dolores. Her voice soft and crackly. Annalise, Your mother's been calling me every day. She says, we need to talk. I didn't call Grandma back right away. I needed a minute to breathe, to process, to steady the noise building in my head. The house was still, save for the clatter of Briley reheating leftovers downstairs. I could smell turkey and burnt marshmallows, but nothing felt warm. Mid-morning rolled in gray and quiet, draping Coeur d'Alene in a kind of soft gloom. The sky held its breath. I opened the window slightly, letting in the bite of cold air, just enough to remind myself I was still real. A knock came at the door, gentle, almost apologetic. It creaked open before I answered. Dolores. She stepped inside, holding a ceramic container with both hands. Soup, the kind she always brought when something unspoken was festering. Her eyes scanned the room quickly before settling on me. You look tired, she said, her voice gentle but worn. I nodded. Did you drive all the way from Sandpoint this morning? She placed the container on the desk beside me. Your mom's been calling, every night this week. She paused. She wants me to talk to you. She said Briley needs a hand, something about her future depending on it. I leaned against the edge of the bed, my arms crossed. And you? Dolores shook her head slowly. I didn't come to convince you, sweetheart. I just needed to see you with my own eyes, see how you were holding up. She sat beside me, her sigh barely audible. That quiet kind of love, the kind that never asks for attention but is always there when the storm hits. She said you're turning your back on family, she added after a pause. But I told her, Annalise doesn't walk away without a reason. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Later that morning, around what would have been brunch if this house believed in shared meals, Mom found me in the sunroom. She was holding a navy blue folder, her lips pursed in what she probably thought was a neutral expression. Can I sit? She asked. I didn't answer. She sat anyway. I know things have been tense, but I think you'll appreciate this. It's not a handout, Annalise. It's an opportunity. She handed me the folder, flipping it open for me like a hostess presenting dessert menus. Inside were a few sheets printed on pastel pink paper. The title in loopy cursive, Briley Rose Interiors, A Vision for Elevated Living. There were mood boards of boho-themed studio apartments and blurry Pinterest quotes like, Your space reflects your soul. No cost structure, no vendor list, just dreams and fonts. She has talent, Mom said, voice tightening. She just needs someone to believe in her. And really, what's $10,000 to you? I closed the folder gently and set it back on the table between us. I'm not investing in this. Her brows shot up. But you haven't even read it. I did. And I'm not saying no because I doubt Briley. I'm saying no because I know what this really is. She narrowed her eyes. What's that supposed to mean? It means you never believed in me. Not when I begged for piano lessons. Not when I got into Northwestern. Not even when my company hit its first million. My voice didn't rise. It dropped lower, quieter, until it stung sharper. You don't see me. You only see what I can provide. Wanda stood up quickly, the chair scraping behind her. That's unfair, Annalise. You're making me out to be some kind of villain. I've done everything I could for both of you. Cruel, I said, is expecting someone to carry everyone else and still be invisible. She left without another word. Dolores stayed behind. We ended up in her guest room, where she kept her jewelry, an antique walnut chest filled with velvet-lined drawers. She opened the second one carefully, fingertips trembling as she reached for a small compartment in the back. It was empty. Something's not right, she murmured. The swan brooch, the one you gave me after your first auction deal. It's gone. She turned to me, eyes heavy. I didn't misplace it. That piece was special. I scanned the rest of the drawer. In its place was a cheap knockoff, a plastic setting where gold should have been, glass instead of stone. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. That evening, I found Briley in the driveway, putting boxes into her car. I approached without pretense. Where's Grandma's brooch? She blinked, caught off guard. What? The heirloom, the one I gave her, the one she just discovered was missing. She hesitated. It's not a big deal. I needed a deposit for the new place. It's just a trinket. My stomach turned. That wasn't yours to take. You wouldn't even notice if she hadn't said anything. That's not the point. She rolled her eyes. God, you act like you're the only one who's ever struggled. No, I said. I act like the only one who's ever had to clean up after everyone else. I turned and walked away. Back in my room, I opened my laptop and began drafting an email to Raymond, my attorney. Subject: I may need formal boundaries. I didn't send it, not yet. That night, as I was closing tabs and preparing to finally rest, a new message popped into my inbox. The sender: harper.accountingadvisor@gmail.com. Subject line: Tax-wise, you may benefit from investing in family. The body was short and full of strategic wording. Assets can become liabilities if not used for generational support. Consider reallocating some liquid holdings into your sister's venture to build equity and emotional legacy. The signature read, Harper James, Certified Wealth Consultant. But I recognized the writing style. It was my mother's voice, word for word. I sat still for a long time, staring at the email, not blinking, not breathing. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I checked the metadata. A habit from early days in appraisal work, before my team grew big enough to delegate the technical stuff. Old instincts kicked in fast. I downloaded the message, opened the source file, scanned the headers. The email was sent from an IP tied to Spectrum Cable Services, registered right here in Coeur d'Alene. The Harper James consultant wasn't in New York, or anywhere near Wall Street. They were in this house, probably just a few rooms away, watching Netflix and eating pie. I pinched the bridge of my nose and let the weight settle in. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was strategy. And Mom was behind it. An hour passed. Maybe more. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and Briley's occasional laugh upstairs as she scrolled her phone. I went back to my inbox, still hoping that maybe, just maybe, that message was the worst of it. It wasn't. A notification popped up from my credit monitoring service. New account activity detected. My stomach clenched. I clicked. A student loan. Opened 3 weeks ago, co-signed by me. I blinked, checked again. The co-signer name was correct. Social security number matched mine. Annalise Hayes. The borrower? Briley Wanda Hayes? No one asked me. No one told me. They just used me. I dialed the loan provider. A chirpy representative came on the line and asked for verification. After passing their identity check, I asked directly, "Who submitted the application?" There was a pause on the other end. "The primary applicant listed the co-signer as a parent," the rep replied. "But the co-signer's details, well, they came from a different email, matching your records." I asked for the source. She paused again. "It was entered manually over the phone," she said. "We don't record those calls publicly, but it originated from an Idaho-based landline." That line, I knew, belonged to my mother. I ended the call. No yelling, no crying. I just stared at the screen. I wasn't angry the way people expect you to be. Not in a breaking plates, slam the door kind of way. I was still, dead still. And in that stillness, I started collecting evidence. I pulled up a blank document and began typing notes. Timestamps, email headers, phone call summaries. I screenshotted everything. Opened a secure folder, labeled it Boundary Violation Family. I wasn't done. A ping broke the quiet. A voice note. From Maya. "Hey girl. Bit random, but your mom reached out last week. Found me through the alumni group. Said she wanted to send you something sentimental and needed your address. I didn't give it, obviously, but it was weird. Just a heads up." I messaged back. "Thanks. She's not sending me anything. She's collecting leverage." A few minutes later, another text arrived. From Jonah, an old friend from Northwestern. "Your mom's asking about your office lease location? Said she might drop by with a gift? Seemed off." She wasn't sending gifts. She was building a profile, one piece at a time. Addresses, loans, emails, investments. In a weird way, it felt like a hostile takeover. But I wasn't a corporation. I was their daughter. Back in my room, I paced slowly, each step careful, calculated. At my desk, I picked up the phone and dialed Raymond. He answered on the second ring. "Annalise? I need to formalize some protections," I said. "You're ready for the cease and desist phase?" He asked gently. "Not just that," I replied. "I want a full financial boundary agreement drafted. Identity protection, legal consequences if breached." "I'll start tonight," he said. After the call, I printed out the email, highlighted the signature, scribbled Mom in the corner, underlined twice. It was a childish move, but it made the truth tangible. I printed the loan confirmation, flagged the confirmation number, attached the rep's name and timestamp. Then I hit record on my voice memo app. "This is Annalise Hayes," I began. "This recording serves as a verbal confirmation that I did not authorize the use of my Social Security number for any student loan in the name of Briley Hayes." When I finished the memo, I saved it to 3 separate drives: cloud, external, and private email. As I sat back, the weight of it all settled into my spine, not as pain, but posture. I was no longer shrinking. I opened a new email to Raymond Carter, ESQ, subject, cease or be cut off. I typed 3 lines beneath it. "I'm no longer issuing verbal warnings. This is your cue to act. If they come for more, they won't get it. They'll get legal." And then I hit send. I closed my laptop, stood and stretched. My body felt different, like armor had replaced exhaustion. As I moved toward the door, I heard laughter from downstairs. Briley. Then another voice, my mother's. "So she's threatening lawyers now?" A pause. "Let her. She still needs us. She just doesn't know it yet." The next day passed slowly. The snow hadn't fallen again, but the sky had stayed heavy, sunless. By early afternoon, the air inside the house felt like something waiting to snap. Around 1 p.m., Wanda knocked lightly on my bedroom door. "Lunch is ready," she said. "Just a little something before you head out." Her tone was syrupy, the kind she used when she wanted something but didn't want to ask directly. I followed her down the hall, the soft creak of the floorboards marking every reluctant step. Everyone was already seated. Briley, Dad, 2 cousins who'd stayed over, and 1 aunt who barely looked up from her phone. The table was set like it was Thanksgiving again. Cloth napkins, candied carrots, even a pie cooling on the windowsill. Overdone. Forced. Dolores wasn't there. Wanda mentioned casually, "She's resting. Headache." I didn't believe it. I suspected Dolores couldn't bear to witness what might happen next. As I slid into the seat nearest the window, the energy around the table buzzed with awkward politeness. No one looked directly at me, but I could feel their eyes dart in my direction when they thought I wasn't paying attention. The tension snapped 5 minutes in. I got up to refill my water, excused myself, and walked back toward the kitchen. That's when I noticed something wrong. My laptop, no longer on my bed. I turned fast, heart already racing, just in time to see Briley walking into the dining room with it in her arms like it was a birthday cake. "Hey, everyone," she said with a too-sweet voice. "Let's see what our quiet little sister's been hiding." She flipped it open and spun it to face the table. The screen, my last active tab, was open to my company's internal dashboard. Bank records, contracts, a pending appraisal for the Whitney Museum, my investment reports. A massive total was displayed clearly at the top. $13 million. Someone gasped. One cousin whispered, "Holy..." Wanda's face turned to stone. Dad stared like I had smacked him. Even Briley hesitated, realizing the number was larger than she expected. "You've let your family struggle," Wanda said slowly. "While you sit on this? You knew I was paying for everything. I paid for your tuition, Briley, the insurance, the plumbing last winter, but you never once asked how I did it. You just expected." Briley didn't blink. "You have no idea what it's like to need help and feel ignored." "No," I said, voice steady. "You have no idea what it's like to give and be resented for not giving more." Dad slammed his hand on the table. "You should be ashamed. Family means support." "And manipulation is what?" I asked. The room went dead quiet. Briley stood. "Fine. You want to be cold? I can be cold too." She stormed out. Less than 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was a tag notification from Instagram. An old picture of us, maybe 10 years ago. Her arm looped through mine at a birthday party. Her caption read, "I held her hand through every milestone. Never thought she'd hide millions while her own family struggled to pay rent. But I guess money changes people." #family first, #heartbroken. It didn't take long. The comments rolled in. "How could she do that to you?" Some people forget where they came from. Others were more skeptical. "You sure she owes you anything? But the damage was done. I closed the app. Then I stood up, walked calmly out the front door, and into the cold. The air was sharp, like clarity. On the porch, I opened my phone, typed a message to Raymond. Proceed with the cease and desist. Add Briley and Wanda. Include breach of privacy. I blocked Briley, then Mom, then Gerald. I emailed the museum's legal team, informed them to lock my account with multi-factor authentication, activated alerts on every bank transaction. I wasn't just protecting my business now, I was protecting myself. I walked around the side of the house, hands deep in my coat pockets, and stared out over the frosted yard. I remembered playing here as a kid, chasing Briley, laughing when we fell into piles of leaves. Back then, I thought family meant you were safe. Now I knew better. I went back inside, past the dining room, silent now except for the sound of plates being cleared. In my room, I sat down and wrote one line in my journal. They've used my silence long enough. I stared at it, then added, they think silence equals permission, that kindness equals weakness. They forgot I built all of this. Alone. Later that night, I was finally starting to pack. The last pair of shoes. My laptop, now locked down with biometric login. I was placing a scarf into my carry-on when my phone rang again. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. This is Annalise. Miss Hayes, this is Dan from Chase Bank's Fraud Division. We've detected an attempt to remotely access your business account. The IP address appears to match a home network we have on record, located in Coeur d'Alene. I didn't even flinch. Lock it down, I said. By dawn, I was on the road. The car was quiet, humming softly against the wind. Snow had melted overnight, leaving damp patches across the pavement like the residue of old mistakes. I had left the house without saying goodbye. My flight from Spokane to Milwaukee was uneventful, just long enough for me to rehearse every conversation I wasn't going to have. By the time I landed, my voicemail box was full. Texts stacked like accusations, some from numbers I didn't recognize. When I reached my office, I didn't unpack. I didn't even turn on the lights. I just sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and began checking my accounts. The first message came in almost immediately. Hey, Annalise, not sure if you saw this yet, but your mom reached out to a few of us, said she's worried you're having some kind of breakdown, told us to check in. Hope you're okay. It was from Lauren, a friend I hadn't spoken to since grad school. 2 more messages followed. One even had screenshots. There it was. Wanda, messaging a journalist I once interned with at the Chicago Tribune, trying to spin a private family concern into something public. I shut the laptop. My phone buzzed again. A text from Wanda. Please, just one call. We can talk like adults. I should have deleted it. Instead, I called. The screen blinked, then connected. At first it was quiet. Then the voices began. Annalise, sweetheart, we're all here, Wanda said. We just want to understand what's going on. All? Hi, Anne, Aunt Diane chimed in. This isn't like you. Your mother's been sick with worry, Uncle Rich added. You don't just walk away from your family. That's not how you were raised. My old high school coach, of all people, spoke next. We were proud of you. What happened? It was a trap, an emotional ambush disguised as concern. I didn't walk away, I said. I backed out of a fire I didn't set. Someone scoffed. Gerald's voice. You think we're the fire? Look in the mirror, Annalise. I hung up. No goodbyes this time either. I left the office for a breath of air, settled into a booth at the cafe on 6th and Maple. The same one I'd celebrated my first consulting contract at. That felt like someone else's life now. I scrolled through my social feed. Bad idea. Briley had gone live. Again. She sat in her bedroom, the one with the lilac curtains and fairy lights. Tears ran down her cheeks in perfect cinematic streaks. A candle flickered behind her. A Taylor Swift song played softly in the background. I've tried so hard to be strong, but my sister, the one who has everything, she treats me like a burden, like I'm not even her blood. The comments poured in. You don't deserve that, girl. She sounds toxic. Cut her off. You don't need that kind of energy. Hashtags scrolled beneath the video. #family trauma, #big sister betrayal, #left behind 22,000 viewers. In less than an hour. I lowered my phone, Celeste, my assistant, sent me a message. Want me to draft a response? Something neutral but firm? No, I typed. We don't play their game, we just shut them out completely. Back at the office, I scheduled a system-wide audit, changed all passwords, enabled biometric locks for every confidential file. I even had the locks to my building replaced. It wasn't panic. It was precision. I didn't want revenge. I wanted removal. Of access, of power, of presence. That night, I sat in my home office, a mug of black coffee cooling beside me, and stared at my reflection in the dark window. They're not louder because they're right, I whispered. They're louder because they've lost control. I opened a folder labeled Legal, scanned down until I found the document Raymond had pre-drafted, Financial Boundary Agreement plus Cease and Desist Packet. I skimmed the lines. One paragraph read, any future attempts to impersonate, access, or defame the client through digital, financial, or verbal means will result in immediate legal action. I clicked Confirm on the scheduling request. We'd notarize it in the morning. That was when my phone rang again. Raymond. Annalise, he said, voice sharp, you need to see something. I sat upright. What is it? The pawn shop receipt from Briley? It wasn't just for your grandmother's brooch. What else? There were 4 additional items, 2 designer watches, a gold fountain pen, and a sapphire cufflink set, all traced back to items you reported years ago, from your personal safe. Silence. And Annalise, the timestamp on the receipt is from 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. They hadn't just ambushed me, they'd been planning it. By the time the sun cleared Milwaukee's skyline, I was already in my office, coffee untouched, blinds still drawn. The weight of the weekend sat on my chest like frost that refused to melt. Raymond arrived at 9 a.m. sharp, trenchcoat still damp from sleet. He didn't waste time with pleasantries, just handed me a manila folder thick with consequence. Fraud, identity theft, and property misuse, he said, setting it on my desk. These are no longer family grievances. These are federal. I opened it slowly. Every tab had my name. Every document trailed a fingerprint, not mine. Wanda's signature here. Briley's email login there. Even Gerald's voice message, transcribed, dated, indexed. They went after your identity, your assets, your name, Raymond added. We have everything we need to move forward, quietly or publicly. Your call. I'm not ashamed, I said. So let it be public. He nodded. Then we file today. As he stepped out to make the first call, Celeste entered, iPad in hand. I pulled the pawn shop video, she said. You're going to want to sit down for this. I didn't. I watched standing. The footage was grainy but damning. Briley, hood up, carried a zippered pouch. She spoke to the cashier, pulled out the brooch, then 3 more items, a Cartier box I'd kept locked away, a vintage family ring, and a Mont Blanc pen my mentor gifted me after closing my first museum exhibit. Timestamp? I asked. November 7th, she replied. 12 days before Thanksgiving. And, she hesitated. She had a key. I looked over. What? That pouch she used? It's the same monogrammed one you used in grad school. She probably made a copy of your drawer key years ago. I didn't respond. I just reached for my phone. 10 minutes later, every shared account, every emergency fund, every card still tied to my name was deactivated. Raymond filed the cease and desist letters. Digital, certified, tracked, Wanda, Briley, 2 cousins, no more appeals, no more guilt. By lunchtime, the bank confirmed the loan had been voided, on the grounds of stolen identity. Charges could still be pressed. And the company's servers? Fortified. We upgraded every firewall, every admin setting. No one could touch me again. Not financially, not legally. Celeste brought me a second coffee, this one hot. Oh, she added, almost casually, there's something happening online. I raised an eyebrow. Briley's original post is being reinterpreted. A former client of yours commented, I worked with Annalise. She's the real deal. None of this is her fault. More comments flooded in. Why does her family feel so entitled to her success? This feels like a setup. Even a YouTube channel I didn't recognize posted a 12-minute breakdown. Family gaslights CEO for millions? It had 20,000 views by mid-afternoon. I didn't smile, but something inside me finally exhaled. Back in my office, I stared at the skyline. 10 floors up, Milwaukee looked like it belonged to someone who had earned their place in it. They wanted my silence to be their sanctuary, I whispered. But my silence belongs to me. And now, it speaks. I turned back to my desk, opened a fresh draft for Raymond. Subject line: Public statement pending. Then came a knock at the door. It was the front desk courier. He held out a slim envelope addressed in delicate cursive. Return address, Dolores. Inside was a personal check, the amount, $4,750. The memo line: repayment for what they took. But what made my hands tremble wasn't the money. It was the note inside. In Dolores's hand. You don't owe us, love, but I hope you still find it. I read it twice, then placed it gently in the top drawer of my desk, beside a photo of me at age 11, holding up a science fair trophy no one had clapped for. This was what closure looked like. Not noise, not rage, just truth, finally speaking louder than obligation. 3 weeks passed like clouds, slow, shapeless, a little unreal. I stood by the wide window of my new home in Madison, just a block from Lake Mendota, and let the quiet fill me. No footsteps overhead, no arguing downstairs, just the hum of winter winds brushing the panes and the smell of pine from the small tree I'd bought, undecorated except for one silver ornament. The condo was modest by anyone else's standards, 2 bedrooms, all neutral tones, but it felt expansive, because it was mine, because no one's approval lived in the walls. I unpacked a box labeled gallery pieces and pulled out a velvet tray of brooches and heirloom earrings, prepping for the upcoming exhibition in Chicago. My fingers paused on a delicate swan pin, identical to Grandma Dolores's, only never stolen. I clipped it gently to a fabric display board. No noise, no guilt, no forced dinners where everyone smiled like it was tradition, not tension. I watered the plants by the kitchen island and caught myself humming. Not a happy tune, just human. That afternoon, I opened the wooden box I kept near my desk. The note from Dolores still sat folded inside. Her handwriting was always a little shaky, even before arthritis. They were wrong, but you did right, it read. I raised a girl who knows how to walk alone. I ran my thumb along the edge of the page, then folded it again and tucked it behind an old Polaroid of us at the county fair. Dolores with her cotton candy. Me with braces and pigtails, holding a ribbon like it was gold. I used to think winning would make them stay. That success was the trade-off for love. Turns out, I just kept paying rent on their expectations. I sat by the fireplace with a mug of peppermint tea and let the memory drift. 11 years old, giving a speech at school after winning a regional competition, rows of folding chairs, but the 2 I'd saved stayed empty. Mom said Briley had a dance recital. Dad forgot entirely. They never came, I whispered to no one, but I stayed. Raymond called mid-afternoon, routine check-in. All's quiet, he said. No countersuits, no new loans attempted. You've got full financial autonomy now. Locked down, safe. Thank you, I replied. But peace isn't just paper. No, it's when they stop renting space in my head. He chuckled lightly. Then you're almost there. After we hung up, I walked to the back patio and stepped into the light December air. There was snow on the ground, but it wasn't cruel snow. It was soft, clean, forgiving. Later that day, I wandered into the Chazen Museum alone. There was a new exhibit on antique personal jewelry, intimate artifacts of women's lives from the last century. In a glass case near the entrance, a swan-shaped brooch caught my eye. A little girl beside me pointed. "That's pretty." "It is," I said, crouching slightly, "and it once belonged to someone who thought she'd never be seen." The girl smiled, then ran off to find her parents. I stood there a while longer, letting the light from the display case settle into my chest like warmth. Back home that evening, I lit a candle and let the silence return. This time it didn't sting, it comforted. I wrote nothing. I texted no one. I just sat with the idea that healing didn't mean erasing. It meant no longer expecting. They may never say sorry, I told myself. That's fine. I said goodbye the moment I stopped asking for love. I don't want revenge. I don't need validation. What I need is space, the kind that isn't filled with excuses, the kind that doesn't ask me to explain why I left. And if anyone ever asks, Yes, I'd do it all again. Peace didn't come easy, but I paid the full price, and I still think it was worth it. Looking back, I didn't lose my family. I lost the illusion that they'd ever truly seen me. And once I let go of that, I found space for something better. Peace on my own terms. Setting boundaries doesn't mean you're unkind. Saying no doesn't make you selfish. And protecting what you've built, especially when no one helped you build it, is not betrayal. It's survival. We don't owe anyone our silence just because they share our last name. Maybe you felt that pressure too, like you're supposed to keep giving until there's nothing left. Like your success somehow belongs to everyone else. But it doesn't. It's okay to choose yourself. It's okay to stop explaining. And it's okay to walk away. Not because you're bitter, but because you're finally free. Now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to choose peace over people, or walk away from something, even someone, you thought was forever? Drop a 1 in the comments if this story touched you in any way, or let me know where in the world you're watching from. I'd really love to know. And hey, if this video helped you feel seen, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another story that speaks to the heart. Hi, I'm Vesna. My sister's engagement party cost over $300,000 at my resort, and when she saw me standing there, she told security, "Kick that beggar out." But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was, they booked it without asking, used my name to fund it, and never even listed me on the guest list. I gave them the floor, brick by brick, and they still called me the problem. So I have to ask, what happens when the one who pays for everything finally stops paying? I noticed it while reviewing the weekly resort schedule over my second cup of coffee. A high-profile event had been quietly slotted onto the Somerset Haven calendar, Ren Sloan Engagement Celebration. The name punched the air out of my lungs. Dahlia's engagement? Here? I hadn't approved the booking. I hadn't even been told about the engagement, let alone that it would be hosted at my resort. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, waiting for the line item to disappear like some kind of clerical hallucination. It didn't. I refreshed the tab, still there. I dialed Ina, my operations lead, without even blinking. "Did you know about this Ren Sloan engagement booking?" There was a short pause. Then her voice came through, calm and matter-of-fact like always. "It was submitted through an outside planner. Booking was confirmed by Marcine Wren." Marcine, my mother. I felt my jaw tighten. And nobody thought to check that with ownership before slapping a 6-figure celebration on our calendar? She wrote in the notes, "Our family has long-standing ties to the property." I exhaled slowly, pressing my fingers to my temples. Sure, as long-standing as pretending the owner's not your daughter. After the call, I sat for a long time. The fog outside the window hadn't lifted, casting soft shadows across the resort's pristine lawns. I remembered the months it took me to fund the renovation of the ballroom they'd just booked behind my back. The hours I spent picking out lighting fixtures by hand. Dahlia never once asked about my business. Not once. I opened my mailbox on the way out of the office later that morning. No invitation, no envelope, nothing. Out of habit, I unlocked my phone and opened Instagram. That was where I found out about her engagement. A reel of her fiancé getting down on one knee on a yacht, followed by a carousel of airbrushed selfies with captions like, "He said forever." One of the photos showed her standing in front of the Somerset Ballroom. I stared at the screen until it went dark in my hand. The next morning, I took the long path from the main lobby to the event wing. It was still early, too early for bridal parties to be fussing with makeup or camera crews. The hallway smelled like floor polish and gardenias. I liked it better this way. Untouched, silent. Inside the ballroom, 2 staff members were arranging chairs. I kept my distance and circled the perimeter, checking lighting. One of the guests must have slipped in early, tall, well-dressed, holding a coffee with too much foam. He smiled at me casually. "Oh, hey, are you one of the cleaning staff from their last venue? You look familiar." They must have brought over their usuals. I stared at him for a second too long, then forced a polite smile. "Something like that." He nodded and walked off. I stood there, hands tucked into the pockets of my slacks, watching him disappear into the hallway. I didn't correct him. I didn't tell him my name was the one on the deed. In the corner of the room, Dahlia's voice rang out in laughter. She hadn't seen me. Or maybe she had and chose not to. Either way, she didn't stop the joke. The rest of the bridal party fluttered around her like accessories. I stepped out and headed toward the loading dock. A few catering staff were talking with the planner. I didn't intend to eavesdrop. It just happened. One of them asked, "Should we be limiting staff access during rehearsal?" The planner said without hesitation, "Bride's family asked for minimal interference. No outsiders, just house staff, no surprises." No outsiders, no surprises. That was when I understood. They hadn't forgotten I existed. They just preferred the version of this day where I didn't. Later that night, I sat on the balcony of my suite with a glass of sparkling water and the guest list open on my laptop. My name wasn't anywhere. Not even as event sponsor, not as family, not even as a courtesy mention. They wanted my building, my lighting, my brand, but not my presence. I shut the laptop. My hand hovered over the glass, then pulled back. This place was mine. Brick by brick, name by name, policy by policy. They booked it like it was just another venue in their pocket. Like I was the outsider. Like I didn't exist. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of anger, not even sadness. My body just refused to rest, as if it knew I'd been erased and didn't want to miss the next move. Around 6:30, I finally got out of bed, showered, dressed in my usual black work slacks and polo, and walked down to the event wing under the pretense of doing a safety walkthrough. The staff were already buzzing, hauling in floral crates, unfolding linen, fine-tuning uplighting. Dahlia's wedding planner barked orders into a headset like she was directing a Broadway premiere. I stayed to the edges, checking sconce outlets and escape routes, things no one noticed until they failed. Then I saw it. Behind the check-in table, partially covered by a clipboard, the printed guest list. Color-coded, indexed, alphabetized. I scanned it. My name wasn't there. Not under family, not under vendors, not under acknowledgments. I stood still for a beat too long, like maybe the paper would change if I stared hard enough. The coordinator leaned over and shifted the clipboard, smiling without recognizing me. "You need something, miss?" "Just passing through," I said, and turned back toward the ballroom entrance. The doors had been flung open, letting the morning breeze in, along with the ego of the hour. Dahlia arrived in a white jumpsuit that probably cost more than my first car. Her fiancé trailed behind her, a living mannequin in expensive loafers. Cameramen circled them like satellites. She posed mid-laugh, chin tilted, eyes trained on her reflection in someone else's sunglasses. I ducked behind the side AV station to check the sound system before the rehearsal playlist was loaded. It was routine, muscle memory, but the moment I stood up and turned toward the middle aisle, I froze. Dahlia was looking directly at me. Or maybe through me. Her smile dropped. Then, still in front of cameras, she raised her voice and pointed. "Who let that woman in? She's messing up the frame." A few heads turned. She added, louder now, to one of the security guys who was halfway through adjusting a spotlight. "Get her out of here. Seriously, kick that beggar out before she ruins the aesthetic." No one laughed. The silence hit before the words did. I didn't flinch. I didn't say anything. I just looked over at the young man she'd barked at. Ryan, barely 22, first season at the resort. He stared at me like his brain was trying to catch up with his ears. I gave him a short nod. "It's all right." He didn't move. But I did. I walked out slowly, every step measured, every eye like a pinprick on my back. No one stopped me. No one said a word, not even her. Through the side hallway, I slipped into the kitchen exit, tablet still clutched against my side. The service corridor opened up into the back garden. Someone was testing the bistro lights. They flickered overhead as I stood under them, breathing hard but soundless. They don't even know whose lights these are, I said out loud. Not to anyone. Not even to myself. Just to whatever was left of the truth hanging in the air. A few feet away, a staffer finished connecting the outdoor speakers. She glanced at me, then back at her task. No one recognized me here. Not as the owner, not even as the one footing the bill. Just another background figure in black. I stayed there a few more minutes, long enough to hear laughter echoing back through the walls. Laughter that made no space for me. Laughter that felt like it came from a world I'd never belonged to, even when I was paying for the door. By the time I returned to my office, my hands had steadied. The tremor was gone. So was the silence in my chest. I'd felt invisible plenty of times. This was different. This was erasure. I pulled up the guest list again on the screen. Still not there. Still not a single acknowledgement that I existed. They were building a legacy on land I purchased, under chandeliers I selected, with walls I had reinforced with soundproofing so the music wouldn't echo too harshly into the atrium. But me, I was the mistake in the frame. Let them keep planning. The floor they're dancing on. It already has my name on it. I stayed up long after the ballroom lights were turned off, sitting in the dark of my suite with my laptop still open, the same guest list glowing back at me. Everyone was there. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, acquaintances from Dahlia's college sorority, even an old Pilates instructor our mother had seen 3 times. Everyone but me. There was no owner. No hosted by Vesna Calder. No thank you for making this possible. Not even a typo of my name. Just nothing. I closed the screen slowly and set it aside. The wine on the table remained untouched. It had gone flat hours ago, but I hadn't had the appetite for anything. I pulled my phone from the charger and stared at the notifications. Missed calls from earlier in the week, mostly from Mom. No voicemail transcripts popped up. I hadn't opened any of them in months. One by one, I began deleting them. Not because I was angry, but because I realized I already knew what she'd say. The same cadence, the same phrasing. Hey, sweetheart, haven't heard from you in a while. We know you're busy. We just assumed you'd say yes. You always do. My thumb moved rhythmically, message after message disappearing, until the inbox looked like it had never existed. I stood and walked to the window, the lights from the rehearsal flickering below like fireflies caught in glass. From up here, it looked like a fairy tale. Down there, I knew better. That's when it came back to me. So sharp it felt like someone had pressed play inside my skull. Age 10. Fresno. A Thursday afternoon. I was sitting at the kitchen table, still in my school uniform, holding a math test with a 94%. I'd been so proud when I got it back. I didn't even wait until dinner to show my mom. She glanced down, smiled faintly, and said, "That's good. Not perfect, but good. Your sister's going to sing at the school recital next week. You should come support her." I remember standing there, holding the paper in both hands, nodding because I didn't know what else to do. My dad, without looking up from his plate, chuckled. If Vesna isn't too busy playing genius. Nobody meant to be cruel. That's what I told myself for years. They were just being themselves, and I had to learn how to live around it. I pulled away from the window, the memory still lingering like smoke. I grabbed my phone again and opened the family group chat. I rarely looked at it anymore, but there it was, the latest message from my mother, sent to the extended family. So proud of our Dahlia. She's always been the shining light of the family. Her big day is going to be unforgettable. No mention of me. No note about the resort, the planning, the logistics I'd quietly handled without complaint. And just below that message, another one from her. Thanks to everyone who helped fund the engagement. Dahlia deserves the very best. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it confirmed something I'd stopped wanting to question. I opened a file I hadn't touched in a while. Family transfers DuxLSX tuition for Dahlia, paid in full. Credit card balances, cleared twice. Mortgage top-ups for the house, completed. Medical co-pays for dad's surgery, covered. Event deposit for mom's women's circle brunch, quietly handled. I scrolled down to the bottom, seeing a decade of deposits and transfers, each line a silent "thank you" I never received. I wasn't the shining light, I whispered, half amused. I was the power supply. The spreadsheet was facts, no emotion, just numbers. Numbers don't lie, they don't exaggerate, and they certainly don't rewrite history to make someone else the hero. And yet, here I was, cast as a shadow again. But I didn't feel anger, not the loud kind. What settled over me was a kind of stillness, a cold clarity that finally made everything make sense. They didn't hate me. They just loved the version of me that showed up with solutions, stayed quiet, and disappeared after the check cleared. They loved the function, not the person, and that wasn't love. I turned back to my desk and created a new folder. Boundary protocols. Immediate family inside. I began drafting a document. Not legal, personal, bullet points. No more silent funding. No more last-minute approvals under my name. No more assumptions without explicit consent. No more treating my generosity as default. There was no rage, just resolve. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need them to say they were sorry for forgetting me, using me, or speaking over me. I just needed them to know I wouldn't allow it anymore. If love only arrives when you pay for it, then maybe it isn't love at all. The next morning, I arrived at the private meeting room behind the main ballroom, with a clipboard in hand and a purpose stitched into my every step. No more sleepwalking through humiliation. No more pretending I didn't see what they were doing, what they'd always done. Vendors were in and out all morning, dropping off invoices and triple-checking timelines. I nodded politely, kept it professional, and made sure no one asked questions I wasn't ready to answer. I didn't owe them anything more than clarity. The banquet layout had been laid out in full-color printouts spread across a table. Each name assigned to a table. Color-coded. Some in bold, some with gold trim around the placards. A touch of vanity, standard for high society events. I scanned the chart. 2 tables for the Sloanes, Thatcher's parents, plus a family friend and his business associate. 1 full row for the Wren relatives. A tucked-away sweetheart table for Dahlia and Thatcher, framed by drapery and orchids. Nowhere, on any page, was I listed. Not even at a backup table with the vendors. Not marked as host. Not even a formality like V. Calder, guest of venue. Nothing. I didn't even exist on the seating plan. I stood there, holding the edge of the table just enough to keep my hands still. If anyone had walked in at that moment, they would have thought I was checking for typos, not realizing I was confirming my own deletion. I left the layout room quietly and headed down the hallway toward the bridal lounge, where I was supposed to check the lighting timers and emergency access routes. The hallway was empty, save for muted laughter from behind the wall. As I waited for the building supervisor to arrive, I leaned against the cool plaster and tilted my head just enough to hear. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, I truly didn't. But once I heard my name, I stayed still. She just doesn't fit the vibe, Dahlia was saying. Her voice had the same sing-song condescension it always carried when she talked about someone beneath her, usually while smiling to their face. Marcine chimed in next, laughing too hard for a woman who prided herself on elegance. I mean, let her stay behind the scenes. As long as she wires the payments on time, I don't care where she sits or doesn't sit. The planner's voice followed. Neutral, professional. Understood. I'll make sure all adjustments go through me directly. And keep her out of the couple's shots, Dahlia added. No one needs to wonder why the help is so overdressed. They all laughed. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just stood there, memorizing every word they had no idea would echo in my mind long after this party was over. By early afternoon, I was back in my suite. I sat down at my desk, removed my shoes, and checked my phone. Notifications buzzed from the family group chat. My uncle had written, "Is Vesna seriously causing issues again? All she ever does is transfer money and make things complicated." An aunt replied, "If she actually cared about family, she'd stop keeping score and just give like the rest of us." Another cousin added a meme, a cartoon woman with a calculator, a messy bun, and steam coming from her ears. Caption: "When the family accountant wants credit for being the bank." I turned the screen over, face down. The rage wasn't loud anymore. It was colder now, settled like frost inside my chest. I opened a blank document on my laptop and titled it, "Emotional Expenses." Then I began to list: wedding deposit, $22,000 Dahlia's college tuition, senior year, $1,400 dad's emergency dental, $3,600 mom's car note, $6,200 holiday flights for 3 family members, $4,100 catering bailout last Thanksgiving, $3,200 floral deposit for this event, $5,000. Next to each item, I left a second column blank. Originally meant for what I received in return. It stayed blank. No acknowledgement, no gratitude, no loyalty, just expectation. I closed the file and sent one email. To eventcoordinator.dahliaevents.com. Subject: Billing and future changes, body. Effective immediately, Somerset Haven will not authorize further expenses related to the Ren Sloan engagement without written approval from ownership. This is non-negotiable. VC. No, sincerely. No sign-off, just my initials. I didn't need the performance of formality anymore, just results. They don't see the storm because they think I'm the one bringing the umbrella. But when you stop holding it up, people finally realize who's been keeping them dry. After sending the email to Dahlia's planner the night before, I thought I might sleep easier. Instead, I woke earlier than usual, my head sharp, my body on alert. Something told me this day wouldn't let me coast through the background. It was just past 7 when Ina knocked on my office door with a rigid brown envelope marked "Confidential" in thick block letters. She looked concerned, but said nothing, just placed it on my desk and waited a beat. "This came from the coordinator's office," she said. "Couriered in this morning. They asked for your review and signature." I gave her a slight nod, thanked her, and waited for her to step out before opening it. Inside was a printed venue contract, thick paper, gold-trimmed headers, meticulous formatting. The event name read, "Ren Sloan Engagement Celebration, Somerset Haven Ballroom." I flipped through the pages with a sinking feeling until I landed on page 8. Liability. In the event of non-payment, all financial responsibility falls to the listed venue executive, Ms. Vesna Calder, signature on file. I hadn't signed a thing, not a document, not a letter of intent. Nothing. But there it was. My name, followed by a signature that looked eerily familiar. They'd lifted my digital signature from a previous contract, cut and pasted. I could even tell which year it came from, based on the style of the initials. I stared at it for a long moment. There was no panic this time, no rapid breathing, no rush of blood behind my eyes. Just a chilling sense of clarity. They didn't even need me present to use me. I had become a tool, a name to slot into a checkbox when things got expensive. I stood up, walked over to the printer, and pulled a red ink stamp from the drawer. Void? I pressed it hard against the signature page and felt the fibers give slightly under my palm. I made 3 copies, filed one under unauthorized document activity, and emailed another to our legal counsel marked urgent. By the time I finished documenting the breach, the morning foot traffic had begun downstairs. I left my office and made my way through the east corridor to where Dahlia's entourage was staging another round of candid content. A light ring had been set up in the hallway, and her stylist team flitted around her like a personal wind machine. As I passed behind the camera setup, one of them whispered, loud enough to be heard, "There's the cleaning lady again. I thought we told her to stay out of frame." My footsteps didn't change. I kept walking, pausing only when I reached the planner standing near the buffet table with a clipboard in hand. "Morning," she said, voice clipped. Is there anything you need me to adjust on the service schedule? I shook my head. Not on the schedule. But there's something that needs to be made crystal clear. She looked up. No further use of my name or this business will be permitted without written authorization. You will receive a revised invoice by noon today, listing only services currently paid for. Any continued setup without confirmation will be treated as trespassing. Her mouth opened slightly. I think we just had a miscommunication. I raised a hand. This is the last time I'll explain myself. Around us, chatter died down. The stylist's hands froze mid-curl. Someone set a mimosa glass down too quickly, the sound sharp against marble. I walked away before she could answer. That afternoon, I returned to my office, exhausted but stable. I had just poured a second coffee when my phone buzzed. Romy Glass. The name made my spine straighten. The text was short. You might want to see what your sister submitted last year. Check the Women's Grant Archive under your name. I didn't respond right away. I stared at the message for at least 30 seconds. Then I opened a browser and pulled up the state-funded Women in Business Grant database. Public awards. Names listed alphabetically. I scrolled, eyes scanning fast. There it was. Vesna Calder. Approved recipient. Sponsored by Wren Event Design Group. I never applied for it. And yet someone had submitted a full proposal with my credentials, my EIN, my business registration number, all routed through a third-party event development fund. The grant had been issued for community wellness event planning. Dahlia had hosted a spa-themed brunch that spring and used it as the showcase. The dots connected on their own. I just followed the line. She didn't just borrow my venue. She built her narrative on my name. I leaned back in my chair, the phone still glowing in my hand. They used my name when it suited them. Now I'll show them what that name really means. The glow from my phone screen finally dimmed as I placed it face down beside my keyboard. The weight of what I'd just uncovered, the grant, the forged signature, the calculated theft of identity, didn't hit me like a slap. It settled deeper, in the bones. It didn't burn. It hollowed. By 5:30 the next morning, I was walking the length of the resort ballroom before a single delivery van had pulled up to the side gate. The chandeliers were dimmed to their overnight setting, casting a golden haze across the space that reminded me of early construction days, when all we had were bare bulbs and prayers. I rolled out my laptop at the tech booth and typed the message without pause. To all event vendors and contractors scheduled under the Wren Sloan engagement, please be advised that, effective immediately, Somerset Haven disclaims all financial responsibility for any remaining balances, services, or deliveries not paid directly by the client. Any further work or goods provided without formal clearance from ownership will be at your own risk. I attached the voided contract from the day before, added the event order log with my notes, and blind copied every department lead. Then I clicked send. I didn't wait for replies. I didn't need a round of applause. All I needed was a record. By noon, the calls began. Short, panicked, overlapping. Ina fielded most of them. Her voice stayed even, never raised. You'll need to contact the client directly for payment. She repeated it with calm finality, like a surgeon calling time of death. The flower vendor wanted to confirm table arrangements, if they were still happening. The cake company threatened to hold delivery unless someone from the Wren family made a down payment. A string quartet canceled outright. The planner pinged Dahlia with at least 7 messages, which, from the copy I was forwarded, went unanswered. I forwarded one polite reply to the whole thread. If they want a $300,000 party, they can pay for a $300,000 party. No more assumptions, no more safety nets they didn't deserve. Later that day, I gathered the full events team in the staff kitchen. Some of them were folding napkins. Others were on their break, sipping iced coffee, laughing softly in the corners. I waited until everyone quieted. I know this week has been heavier than most, I began, and you've all handled it with more grace than I could have asked for. They looked at me, waiting. But as of now, No staff is to continue with setup or guest service for this event unless we receive a new contract. Paid in full, upfront. This is no longer a house favor. This is business. No one questioned it. Ina stood beside me, arms crossed, nodding slightly. We weren't just drawing a line. We were building a wall. By late afternoon, I needed a moment to reset, so I scrolled through Instagram while sipping lukewarm tea. My thumb stopped on a story post, one of Marcine's, a picture of a delicate gold bracelet. The caption read, "So touched by Dahlia's gift, she always remembers the details." I blinked once. That bracelet? I had that one shipped. I had hand-selected it 2 months ago, added the note myself. It wasn't extravagant, just something I knew Marcine liked, a style she hadn't bought for herself in years. But she'd assumed Dahlia gave it. Of course she did. Why wouldn't she? Dahlia was the thoughtful one, the favorite, the one who showed up with flair while I stayed quiet in the background, covering costs. I didn't react. I didn't comment. I didn't correct her. I just hit mute story. Let them keep believing whatever helps them sleep. I wasn't here to rewrite their fantasy. I stood, poured the cold tea into the sink, and brewed a fresh cup. As it steeped, I opened a new draft email. 2. Planera Dahlia Ren Events Subject. Final Access Notice Body. As of 6 p.m. today, access to Somerset Haven's main ballroom will be restricted unless written confirmation of full payment is received. This is non-negotiable. VC. It was time for consequences, not conversations. That evening, I walked back through the main corridor. Dahlia's crew was rehearsing a champagne pour video for her soft arrival. Staff stood awkwardly, waiting to see if I'd allow it. I didn't stop them, not yet. But I didn't smile either. I passed silently, pausing only to glance at the entry arch now lit up in soft white. They thought they were about to walk through their moment. What they didn't know was that the moment no longer belonged to them. You wanted me invisible. I'll give you something unforgettable instead. By sunrise, I was already dressed and pacing my office, waiting for the printer to spit out what Romy had sent overnight. I'd barely slept, no surprise, but my thoughts were crystal clear. The silence had gone stale. It was time to bring receipts. The document was only 6 pages, but it was enough. At the top, California Women in Business Grant Application, awarded 2022. Beneath that, the name Vesna Calder, listed as founder and sole operator of Somerset Haven. The business plan was mine, cut and pasted from an old LinkedIn write-up I'd nearly forgotten existed. The financials? Pulled from public data I'd used for a speaking panel years ago. Even the mission statement was identical. And the contact email? Belonged to Dahlia. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just slid the printout into a folder, tucked it under my arm, and walked to the ballroom. The room was already buzzing when I arrived. Vendors were hauling in crates of stemware, flower arrangements, silk runners. Champagne buckets lined the tables, and Dahlia stood in the center of it all like a director on her opening night, micromanaging the placement of a floral arch. I waited until the planner looked up and spotted me. She gave a tentative smile, already unsure where she stood after the day before. "Can we help you with something?" she asked, her tone too sweet to be sincere. I didn't answer her. I walked straight to Dahlia, who was holding a clipboard and barking something about rose petals. "Dahlia," I said. Calm. Firm. She turned, half smiling. That dropped quickly when she saw what was in my hand. I opened the folder and handed her the document. "This ring a bell?" I asked. She glanced at it, then back at me. "Ves, that's old. I didn't think you'd care. You didn't think I'd care that you submitted a grant under my name? Using my credentials? Claiming to be the founder of a business I built from nothing?" She laughed. Not convincingly. "It was just for the paperwork. You weren't using it." I stared at her, wondering how someone could talk like that and still sleep through the night. "You lied," I said. "On a government-funded application, using my name, you not only stole credit, you cashed the benefits." It's not that serious, she snapped. You always make everything dramatic. That was when her voice raised, and people turned. The planner, the decorator, the sound tech. They all paused, waiting for what would follow. I'm not the one who faked a resume, I said. You didn't just borrow my name. You impersonated me, publicly, on record. Her eyes flickered. The air between us cooled instantly. Dahlia's voice dropped, but not enough that others couldn't hear. Let's not pretend people actually like you, Vesna. They tolerate you because you pay for things. You think they come here for your company? Please. Silence stretched. Then she added, louder, like she wanted an audience for this part. Take away your money, and what do you have left? Nobody. That's what. You walk around acting like you're better than everyone, like you're some moral compass. But without your money, you're just sad and alone. A waiter, mid-pour, froze. You could have heard a pin drop on that marble floor. I took a breath. It didn't shake. I looked at her for exactly 3 seconds. Then I folded the grant document in neat thirds, walked over to the nearby trash bin, and dropped it inside. Thanks for clearing that up, I said evenly. I turned to the planner. Start making calls, I told her. You'll need to find a new venue for the rest of this event. She blinked. What? You heard me. We're done here. I didn't wait for a reply. As I walked toward the doors, voices behind me stirred. Confused. Curious. But I didn't turn around. I didn't need validation. My steps were enough. Somewhere near the arch, I heard someone whisper, She owns this place? And they spoke to her like that? I kept walking. There was nothing more to prove. You mocked what I built because you knew you could never build it yourself. After I walked out of that ballroom, I didn't go back to my office. I didn't need to. What needed to be said had already been carved into silence. The building knew. The walls remembered. My name was in the mortar, in the fire codes, in the liability coverage. I didn't need a title card or a mic to prove ownership, but proof was coming anyway. That afternoon, Somerset Haven's grand ballroom turned into a parade of velvet gowns, designer shoes, and performative hugs. Guests arrived in waves. A pair of bloggers were stationed near the entrance snapping photos. A local event magazine sent someone to live-stream Newport Glam, Central Coast Chic, or whatever label they were selling that day. Delia greeted people like royalty. She laughed too loud, held her champagne too high, called everyone babe and my angel. The wedding planner scurried around her like a satellite on a timer, eyes darting toward staff whose expressions were already tight with confusion. Thatcher's parents arrived just before 4. His mother wore a navy sheath dress and pearls that probably had their own insurance policy. His father shook hands with the valet, like they'd known each other for years. Champagne was offered. Dahlia gave her rehearsed welcome speech, not a single mention of the venue. I watched it unfold from the back of the room, standing just behind a curtain near the service door. I had told the AV team exactly when to cue the video. They followed the instruction like it was gospel. At 4:17 p.m., the house lights dimmed. A hush fell. The screen came alive with glittering gold titles, Celebrating a Legacy of Love. But after 10 seconds, the footage glitched, then cut to a new clip. Raw. Vertical phone video. A shaky frame. No filters. No slow-motion transitions. Dahlia's voice, unmistakable, pierced the room. Kick that beggar out before she ruins the aesthetic. Gasps. Audible ones. Someone dropped a fork. The video played only 7 more seconds. No names, no context. Just a moment. A very real, very unpolished truth. Then the screen went black. A beat of silence. Then I stepped out from behind the curtain. I wasn't dressed like a guest. I wore what I always did when the stakes were real. A tailored black blazer, simple heels, hair pulled back. No jewelry except the key card clipped to my waist. My badge of authority. I walked to the mic in the center of the stage. I didn't rush. Let them see me. Let them feel the quiet shift. I'm sorry for the interruption, I said. My name is Vesna Calder. I am the founder and sole owner of Somerset Haven. The room held its breath. This venue was offered in good faith. That faith was violated. I let the silence land. The business you're standing in was built, brick by brick, contract by contract, by someone you just heard referred to as a nuisance, a problem, a blemish. My eyes found Dahlia, standing frozen beside Thatcher, her face pale but her jaw still locked. I didn't look away. Effective immediately, the Ren Sloan engagement event is canceled. Guests are welcome to stay for refreshments, but this facility will no longer support this performance. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Others looked around, unsure if it was theater or truth. A woman near the catering table set her glass down and started clapping. A man near the AV booth followed. I didn't ask for applause. I wasn't there for redemption. I was there for correction. Thatcher looked from me to Dahlia, his mouth slightly open. His mother leaned toward him and whispered, "You knew she owned it?" Dahlia said nothing. I stepped down from the platform and walked out through the main exit. As I passed the hallway, I heard a whisper from one of the servers, young, maybe 20, holding a tray of untouched shrimp skewers. "I'm glad someone finally said it," she murmured. I gave her a nod. Just once. Outside, the sun was slipping behind the trees. The wind picked up slightly, pushing the linen banners at the edge of the terrace. For once, I wasn't walking away quietly. They gave her the spotlight, I gave her the floor, and then took it back. The air was still sharp the next morning, the kind that slides in under doorframes and lingers even with the windows shut. I sat alone in my suite, a mug of coffee slowly cooling on the windowsill beside me, watching the staff below begin resetting the property like nothing monumental had happened the day before. No sirens, no lawsuits, no press conference, just silence. My phone buzzed once against the glass, and I didn't have to guess who it was. I picked it up, glanced at the screen. Dad. I didn't open the message right away. I took one more sip of coffee, cold, bitter, but familiar, before unlocking it. It didn't have to go this far. Your sister's devastated. Your mother's embarrassed. Let's not make this worse. No? Are you okay? No. I saw what happened. No? I'm sorry we let it get here. Just, don't ruin what's left. I read it again. Let it sit. And then, quietly, I deleted it. The walk across the lawn was quiet. Most of the vendors were gone. Just a few carts being wheeled back to the supply shed, the last of the staging lighting being packed. The floral arch had been broken down into buckets, roses stripped of their decorative wire, hydrangeas browning at the edges. I passed by the reception hall's entrance and spotted a folded napkin on the floor. Ivory linen, embroidered in silver thread with the initials DW. Dahlia's signature branding. For a moment, I considered picking it up, but I didn't. Let her come back for her things. I'd carried too much of them already. I continued around the garden and into the west wing where Ina was waiting. She handed me a manila envelope, her expression unreadable. "It's from the Sloan's side," she said. "Partial refund, under Dahlia's account. No note, just the receipt." I took it, looked it over, then walked to the office and signed it without a word. That's the last check they'll ever cash with my name attached to it. Ina didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She understood. The day moved slowly after that. No drama, no confrontation, just recalibration. The kind that seeps into your bones after you've stopped trying to earn peace and started defining it on your own terms. That evening, Somerset Haven hosted a quiet vow renewal. Nothing grand, just 30 or so guests. A couple in their 60s celebrating 4 decades of marriage. It was the kind of gathering I loved most. Understated, meaningful, free from spectacle. I stayed at the back of the room, leaning against the far wall with a ginger ale in hand. No one knew who I was, and for the first time in a while, that felt like a gift. During the ceremony, a little girl, maybe 7 or 8, ran past me chasing after a bubble wand. She paused, looked up at me with wide eyes and said, "Are you the owner, lady?" I smiled. Yeah, I am. She grinned back. Cool. I want to be like you. And just like that, something that had been clenched tight in my chest for years loosened. Not because I needed to be admired, but because someone had finally seen me without me having to announce myself. When the guests left and the chairs were folded away, I went back to my office one last time that night. I didn't check the invoices. I didn't read any vendor updates. I sat down and opened a new file. Blank, quiet. Just my name at the top. Vesna Calder, personal. I hit record and let my voice carry the rest. I used to think love meant sacrifice. Give until it hurts. Give until it works. But now I know love without respect is just performance, and I won't audition anymore. I saved the file, closed the laptop, and turned off the light. Some people learn love through praise, some through silence, and some of us had to learn that walking away wasn't cruel. It was survival. They lost their sponsor. I found my voice. Before I go, I want to say something not just as the woman who built Somerset Haven, but as someone who had to unlearn the idea that love only counts when it hurts. If there's one thing this journey taught me, it's this. Being needed is not the same as being loved, and giving until you're empty doesn't make you noble. It makes you invisible. Sometimes setting a boundary isn't about pushing others away. It's about finally choosing yourself after years of choosing everyone else first. I know many of you listening have carried burdens in silence. Maybe you've been the quiet one, the fixer, the peacemaker, the person everyone calls when something breaks. But let me ask you, when was the last time someone asked how you're really doing without needing something in return? If this story spoke to something in you, if it made you feel seen, drop a 1 in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. And if it didn't connect, that's okay too. Let me know what didn't sit right and what kind of story you need to hear. We grow when we share. If this video touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There are more stories coming, real ones, raw, imperfect, human. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop shrinking for people who were never meant to see your full size. Thank you for spending this time with me. I'll see you in the next story. Hi, I'm Kaylin. On my 20th birthday, my sister gave me a glitter crown labeled King of Disappointment. Everyone laughed. My mom toasted to it. My dad took pictures. I was the one flipping burgers for my own party. 3 days later, they apologized. But by then, I'd already cut the power, canceled the insurance, and closed every account that carried their names. They thought it was a joke. But what kind of family plans your humiliation like a surprise party? Ever wonder what happens when the quiet one finally speaks? What if I told you the crown was just the beginning? I should have known something was off when they didn't let me help set up. My birthday, my backyard, and somehow I was just a guest. The tablecloths were pastel pink, strung too tight across the folding tables. Jolene flitted around like she was the mayor of Springdale, tossing air kisses and laughing just a little too loud. And the guests? Not a single one was from my circle. All her friends, people who barely remembered my name. They brought out a cake I was allergic to, chocolate hazelnut. I hadn't eaten that since my ER trip in college. When I pointed it out to Corliss, my mother, she waved a dismissive hand. Just scrape off the top, don't make it a thing. I forced a smile as guests hugged me with that awkward stiffness you reserve for coworkers you don't know well. No one asked me how I felt. They just shoved phones in my face for selfies, or posed with Jolene while I stood behind the grill, flipping burgers. One guy, I think he was Jolene's friend from Pilates, joked, "You're the birthday chef, huh? Multi-talented." I was too busy making sure the meat didn't burn to laugh. Midway through the party, Jolene called everyone's attention. "We have a special surprise for our very own Kaylin," she said, grinning like she was giving me a scholarship. She reached into a paper bag and pulled out a crown, cheap cardboard, glittered in red. Thick, blocky letters across the front. King of Disappointment. People erupted with laughter. Even my dad chuckled. Mom didn't even lift her glass of rosé. I froze. For a second, I thought maybe this was a prank, something we could all laugh about later. But then Jolene stepped forward and placed it on my head. "There," she said, straightening it. "Now you finally have a title." I smiled. Thin. Mechanical. Just wide enough to make it seem like I was playing along. "It's just a joke, Kaylin," Jolene chirped. "Lighten up." A joke you had printed. A joke you rehearsed. A joke that stuck. After that, no one handed me a plate. I was asked to take photos of everyone else. "Can you get one of us with the cake?" "Oh, and a group shot. Make sure everyone's in it." I took a dozen pictures that night. I wasn't in a single one. At some point, I found myself clearing plates, picking up half-drunk sodas and tossed napkins. A cousin leaned in and said, "Didn't know you were working catering now." I laughed. Because that's what you do when the pain is so familiar. It stops stinging and just settles in like background noise. And the worst part? The credit. People kept praising Jolene for the party. "You're such a great sister." "This is so thoughtful." Corliss beamed with pride, like she had raised Miss Hospitality. No one knew I'd paid for the decorations, or booked the tables, or ordered the food under Jolene's name, because her card was maxed out again. I was the scaffolding, and she was the photo op. It wasn't just the crown, it was the applause after. I stood there, in my own backyard, wearing a joke on my head and cooking for people who didn't know my middle name. And still, I smiled while cutting the cake. Even though it was Jolene's favorite flavor, I wiped down the counter as the living room filled with laughter and clinking glasses. Jolene's voice carried loudest, already telling stories like the whole evening had been her idea. I heard someone toast to "the best big sister ever," and felt the rag in my hand soak through with something colder than dishwater. There's something twisted about scrubbing ketchup off plastic plates while people celebrate your humiliation 5 feet away. That crown, King of Disappointment, wasn't a prank. It was a label they'd been dying to stick on me, and the moment they did, they cheered like it was liberation. I walked into the kitchen, where Jolene was sipping her seltzer and scrolling through photos on her phone. "Can we talk?" I asked. She didn't even look up. "Sure, but if this is about the crown, relax. You've always been kinda heavy. Thought a little roast might lighten you up." I bit the inside of my cheek. "You planned that?" Jolene smirked. "Of course not." "Well, maybe, but it was funny." Everyone laughed, Kaylin. "Don't be so uptight." She didn't blink, like it cost her nothing to cut me open and toss glitter on the wound. "You know I've been the one paying for this house, right?" I said. That made her pause. Briefly. Then she tilted her head, smug. "Oh, come on. You live here. That's your rent. We all contribute." "I paid your car insurance last month." Jolene gave a small laugh, like I'd confessed something embarrassing. "Because you're obsessed with being the savior. No one asked you to. You volunteered. That's on you." She stepped closer, dropped her voice. "You were raised, fed, sheltered, and you still want credit?" And there it was. Not just cruelty, clarity. She meant every word. I turned away before she could see my face break, then headed to the living room. Maybe, just maybe, Corliss or Wendell would say something different. Maybe they'd acknowledge how wrong this all felt. But when I opened my mouth, Wendell cut in with that familiar weariness. "It was just a party, Kaylin. People laugh. You've always been sensitive. Don't make it bigger than it is." Corliss barely looked up from her phone. "Your sister meant well. She went through a lot to make today special." Special! That was the word they used. I looked at both of them. The people who had watched me grow up, who had leaned on me when Jolene couldn't hold a job, who had handed me the family grocery list more times than I could count. And all I saw were two people who refused to see me at all. They weren't neutral, they were aligned. And I was on the outside, again. When someone laughs while you bleed, and the rest of them hand that person a towel, that's not a family, that's a production. I didn't slam the door when I got to my room. I closed it like I was sealing a tomb. Sat down on the floor, the crown still in my hair like some cheap artifact of a cruel empire. I didn't cry, didn't rage. I looked at it, really looked at it. So be it, I whispered. Then I crawled over to my desk, opened my laptop, and clicked on a folder I hadn't touched in months. It was called Contingency in Case They Go Too Far. I woke up before the sun. I hadn't slept much anyway. The house was still quiet, but I could hear the faint clink of dishes in the sink, the ones I'd washed last night while they passed around drinks and toasted to each other. My back still ached from leaning over the grill, my face from holding that damn smile. I reached for my phone on the nightstand. I wasn't ready to open messages, but habit won. The first thing on my screen was a video, birthday recap, posted by Jolene. The thumbnail showed a slow-motion confetti pop, everyone laughing. I pressed play. There I wasn't, not once. Every clip, every photo had been curated like a marketing campaign. Jolene laughing, Jolene with the cake, Jolene giving a toast, wearing a new dress I hadn't seen before. It was all so polished, edited with upbeat music and light filters. My name was in the title, but not in the content. Somehow they managed to make a party about me without me, I muttered, eyes dry. Scrolling through the comments, I saw lines like, "Best party ever." "Jolene, you're the real MVP. You always go above and beyond for your sister." It wasn't just insulting, it was theft. Emotional, social, even financial. I'd paid for that cake. I'd arranged the food delivery. I'd covered the cost of the table rentals when Jolene's card bounced. She promised to Venmo me after payday. That never came. And now, she was the hero of the narrative. I leaned back on my pillow and stared at the ceiling. For a brief second, I let my mind pretend maybe it was all a misunderstanding. Maybe she forgot to tag me. Maybe she didn't realize how it looked. Then my phone buzzed with a new message. "Hey, was that you in Jolene's video? Someone told me you're still living off your parents." It was from Emily, a friend from college who I hadn't spoken to in months. I stared at the screen, pulse slowing to a crawl. Living off my parents? That's what they were telling people? My fingers moved before my brain caught up. I opened a spreadsheet app and pulled up my personal finances. Every grocery bill, every utility I'd paid, Jolene's tuition top-up, her car insurance, all with my name on it. No reimbursements, no acknowledgement, just silence. Then I remembered that brunch from last week, when I'd met Jolene and her friends downtown. She had laughed with them, casually tossing out, "Kaylin's still figuring things out. We let her crash with us until she gets stable." And I had smiled. Quietly, not correcting her. I had paid for that brunch, quietly, with my card. "They didn't just erase me, they rewrote me," I said aloud. I got up and printed one page from my spreadsheet. Just one. I pinned it to the corkboard above my desk, next to a sticky note with my rent due date. You can't erase what I paid for. Elvis once said, "Truth is like the sun. You can shut it out for a time, but it ain't going away." I wasn't trying to make them look bad. I just wasn't going to let them keep pretending. I opened my notes app and titled a new entry. What they said, what really happened. And then I began to log it all. Every twist, every transaction, every moment someone told me I was too emotional, too sensitive, too much. I backed it up to the cloud, encrypted and safe. If they could rewrite the story, then so could I. The difference was, I had the receipts. A few hours passed. I didn't eat, didn't shower, just wrote. Then, while taking a break, I opened Instagram again and saw a photo reposted by someone I didn't even recognize. Me in the background, barely visible, out of focus. The caption read, "Family goals." I laughed. Not loudly, not bitterly. Just enough to feel the irony in my chest. They call it family, I call it fiction. The air felt still that morning, like something had shifted, but the world hadn't caught up yet. I sat up slowly in bed, sunlight creeping through the blinds in quiet strips across the wall. I hadn't checked my phone since yesterday. I didn't need a screen to tell me what I already knew. There was something colder than sadness moving through me now. Not grief, Not even anger. Clarity. I slid out from under the covers and padded across the room, barefoot, to my desk. The laptop was still open from the night before. The folder labeled Contingency blinked back at me like it had been waiting for this moment longer than I had. I opened my banking dashboard. What started as a glance became a deep dive. Transfer after transfer. My name, Kaylin R. Holloway, on every single transaction. Rent for the house, tuition payments, utility bills, insurance premiums, grocery deliveries, auto repairs, even Jolene's dental work last spring when she forgot her card. Line after line. My fingerprints on their survival. Every time they said, "We'll figure it out," I figured it out. I whispered, scrolling faster. The numbers climbed until they blurred together. When I finally stopped to add them up, the figure on the screen was higher than I expected. 5 digits. No commas. Just weight. I sat back in the chair and let the weight land. And then, like clockwork, my memory offered up flashbacks in quick, cutting flashes. Standing in a grocery checkout line while Mom's card was declined. She looked at me with those practiced eyes, not panicked, expectant, like she knew I'd step in, signing Jolene's car insurance as a cosigner. "Just for a month," she said, "until my bonus hits." There was never a bonus, only more bills. Funny how fast just this once becomes a job description. I opened a new spreadsheet, titled it, "What I Paid So You Could Pretend I Wasn't There." It wasn't bitter, it was business. I logged everything, date, amount, purpose, who it benefited. I highlighted every entry that went toward Jolene's lifestyle. Brunches, spa days, those new shoes she wore in the birthday recap video. Then I wrote the email. Subject: Visibility body. You've erased me from your memories. I'll give you the record instead. I attached the spreadsheet and hit send. Jolene, Corliss, Wendell, all 3. No drama, no threats, just clarity in .xls format. I sat there for a while, staring at the screen. Then I clicked into my own savings. Hawe 43 sir. That was all I had to my name after carrying this family for 2 years. Not even enough for a deposit and first month's rent in a town this size. I wasn't generous. I was scared to say no. That was the real shame. Not that they took, but that I made it easy. I let the fear of being called selfish hold the door wide open. No is a complete sentence, I muttered. I'd read that somewhere. Anne Lamott, maybe. I used to roll my eyes at quotes like that. Now I was living it. I printed the invoice, just 1 page, and pinned it to the corkboard above my desk. Not for them, for me. If no one else will name what I gave, I will. The printer beeped as it finished. I stood there staring at that paper like it was a certificate, not of achievement, but of survival. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Wendell. "We need to talk." I didn't know it was this serious. I stared at it. No response. Not yet. I hadn't sent the invoice so they'd talk. I sent it so I could stop. It had been 2 days since I sent the invoice. 2 days since I laid out every dollar, every receipt, every moment they pretended I didn't matter while spending the money I quietly provided. And in those 2 days, nothing. No one mentioned the email. Not at breakfast, not in passing, not in the silence that had replaced basic decency in this house. Silence doesn't mean remorse. Sometimes it means they're just waiting long enough to say, "See? She got over it." I sat on the porch with a chipped mug of coffee, pretending it was the peace I'd earned. The air was heavy, not with heat, with denial. And then my phone buzzed. A message from Corliss. "I know things got a little intense, but family needs to stick together. You've always been the dependable one." I read it once. Then again. That word. Dependable. Not loved. Not valued. Just useful. I wrote back. "Are you acknowledging what happened?" She replied almost instantly. "I just think it's time to move on. You're still family. It's your duty." Duty. I stared at that word until the screen dimmed. I wasn't born into duty. I was trained into silence. That evening, dinner passed like it always did. Quiet, empty, functional. Jolene chewed like nothing had happened, still scrolling on her phone between bites. Wendell buried his face in the newspaper like it was a bunker. Corliss hummed while spooning mashed potatoes onto plates like we were a family from a TV show rerun. No one looked at me. No one asked how I was. This family doesn't heal, I thought. It buries. I finally broke the silence. Did any of you read the email I sent? Wendell rustled the paper, but didn't answer. Jolene smirked without looking up. It was dramatic. You've always had a flair for the theatrical. And just like that, the conversation was over. Later that night, another message from Corliss lit up my phone. If you felt hurt, I'm sorry you saw it that way. But please don't let this divide us. I read it 3 times. That wasn't an apology. That was gaslighting with a smile. They didn't want me to be okay. They just wanted me to shut up and resume the role. Daughter, fixer, doormat. Quiet and reliable. I started typing. I wasn't hurt because you joked. I was hurt because you believed it. Then deleted it. Some things are too true to be sent to people who won't understand. I unplugged the Wi-Fi router from under my desk. Not in anger, just quiet decision. Then I stood and pulled down every photo from the corkboard. Family trips, fake smiles, Christmas mornings where I took the pictures, but wasn't in any of them. I didn't rip them, I just stacked them in a shoebox. Not to erase, just to make space. They don't notice when I disappear from the pictures. So let's see what happens when I disappear in real life. I logged into the payment dashboard, the one connected to utilities, insurance, rent. Line by line, I started unlinking my accounts. Water, electric, internet. Gone, gone, gone. It wasn't revenge, it wasn't punishment, it was self-preservation. They ran the machine on my silence. But I wasn't going to be the fuel anymore. I was halfway through folding laundry when my phone buzzed with a fraud alert. Overdraft warning. I froze. I hadn't used my card all week. Not once since I shut off the autopays. Not since I stopped fueling the machine. At first, I thought it was a mistake, some technical glitch. But when I logged in, I found 2 charges. Same day, same store, both under Jolene's name. One for a spa treatment, the other for a new pair of sneakers she'd been eyeing. The card used? Mine. One I'd removed from the shared account weeks ago. Or so I thought. I walked down the hallway, phone in hand, straight to her room. She was sitting cross-legged on the bed, scrolling through her phone like she had nothing in the world to worry about. She didn't even flinch when I spoke. Did you use my card? She barely looked up. Relax. It was saved from before. I thought you wouldn't notice. That word, thought, hit me harder than the money missing. You didn't think I'd notice, I said, my voice low. Or you didn't think I'd matter? Jolene blinked, finally setting her phone down. It's not a big deal, Kaylin. It's not like you're starving. It wasn't about money. It was about the ease with which she decided I was a resource, not a person. I turned around without another word. Back in my room, I took screenshots of every transaction, marked the dates, the vendors. I labeled the folder. Legal. In case. Because we'd passed the point of betrayal. This wasn't family dysfunction. This was theft. I thought about telling Corliss, about demanding they do something. But I already knew what I'd hear. It's just a misunderstanding. Let's not blow this out of proportion. They're your sister. They don't care about wrong or right. They care about comfort, keeping things quiet, keeping me quiet. So I didn't yell. I documented. They can ignore an argument, but they can't unsee proof. That night, Corliss knocked gently on my door. Her voice dipped in syrup. Hey, sweetie, can you help cover the water bill this month? Just this one more time. I opened the door and looked her square in the face. I already did, for the last 6 years. She blinked, taken aback. What's with the attitude? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. What's with the assumption I'll keep bleeding for a family that calls it kindness when they take? She didn't respond. She didn't have to. That moment hung in the air like something rotting in the walls. unspoken but undeniable. After she walked away, I grabbed my laptop. One by one, I logged into every account linked to my name. Car insurance, electricity, Wi-Fi, health premiums, even the Netflix account Jolene always pretended was hers. Delete, remove, revoke, confirm. They don't get to choose what I give anymore. That part of the story ended when they turned generosity into a liability. When I was done, I stood in the kitchen, the fridge humming beside me. I wrote a note on a sticky pad and slapped it next to the grocery list Jolene never updated. If you need help, ask someone you respect. I didn't sign it. They knew my handwriting. As I turned off the kitchen light and walked back to my room, my phone buzzed again. Jolene was live on Instagram. The title read, "Clearing the Air." Of course. She went public, so I opened my files. I poured my coffee in silence, the hum of the fridge the only sound in the kitchen. The house felt unusually cheerful. Jolene's music leaked through the hallway. Corliss was humming like she hadn't read a single comment from last night's live stream. No one mentioned my absence in that video. No one mentioned me at all. They erased me in real time. With Wi-Fi and applause. I took my mug to the dining table and opened my laptop. The cursor blinked at me like it was asking permission. I didn't slam a single button. Every click was calculated, methodical. Water bill, disable autopay. Electric, change login credentials. Internet, remove saved card. Health insurance, unlink bank routing. Jolene's name disappeared from my authorized users list like she had never existed. I didn't yell. I didn't announce it. I just stripped their access like I was finally closing a back door I never meant to leave open. If you want independence, I said aloud to no one, this is what it looks like. The coffee had gone cold by the time Corliss walked into the kitchen. She didn't look up from the paper she was holding. "Hey, sweetie," she said, like we hadn't traded words like razors 3 nights ago. "Could you drop off a check at the dentist for Jolene? She's been swamped." I took a breath, smiled politely. If she has teeth, she has hands, she can go. She blinked, let out a chuckle that didn't match her eyes. "You okay?" "Finally!" That night, after dinner passed in the usual performance of civility, Wendell at his crossword, Corliss wiping down an already clean countertop, Jolene texting with her neck tilted just enough to seem unreachable, I asked them to sit. They gathered in the living room reluctantly, like I'd called a meeting for something trivial. I stood, arms relaxed. "I won't take long," I said. "I just need to be clear." Jolene rolled her eyes, dramatic as always. "Is this a TED Talk?" I looked at her, calm, controlled. "No, but it's the last warning you'll get without paperwork attached." That made Wendell stir. "Let's not make this bigger than it is." "It already is," I replied. "You're just the last to admit it." They didn't respond. Not because they didn't have something to say, because they realized the rules had changed and none of them knew the new playbook. Back in my room, I opened my journal, wrote the date at the top and the phrase that had been circling in my head since I clicked remove for the last account. Today wasn't about shouting. It was about not whispering anymore. I inserted my flash drive into the laptop and copied everything over. Banking records, screenshots, email threads, labeled the folder, failsafe. I remembered a quote I'd read years ago, but never let sink in until now. Don't set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Penny Reed had written that. It stayed with me like truth often does, quiet at first, then sharp. My laptop pinged just as I was about to shut it. A new email from Corliss. Subject, urgent, account access denied. Of course, they wanted a silent provider. I became a quiet firewall instead. I didn't even hear the email chime. I just saw the red notification dot glaring back at me from the top of my screen. Subject line, loan account flagged for default. Urgent. My heart didn't race. Not anymore. That part of me had worn out. I clicked without hesitation. The loan was in my name. The balance overdue. The mailing address matched this house. The email and phone number on file? Jolene's. You can't just steal a name and call it family. I called the creditor directly. The woman on the other end was polite in that careful, legally bound kind of way. After confirming my identity and verifying the last 4 digits of a number I hadn't used in 2 years, she spoke again. Yes, Ms. Holloway. The account was opened 3 months ago under your full name, with your SSN, but the contact info matches someone else. Can you send me a copy of the signed application and the IP address used to submit it? There was a pause. Yes, we'll email that to you by the end of the day. That's all I needed. I added the new evidence to my folder, the one labeled legal in case, because this wasn't emotional anymore. This was criminal. I stepped into the hallway, my socked feet making no sound against the old wood floor. Jolene was in her room, door cracked just wide enough for the music from her Bluetooth speaker to spill out. She didn't look surprised when I knocked. You opened a loan in my name, I said. She didn't even mute the music. You always overreact. It was just paperwork to get through a rough patch. Rough patch? I blinked. That's not what this is. That's not a patch. That's jail language. Her jaw clenched. Then, like a child scolded for stealing candy, she slammed her bedroom door. Not a denial, not even an apology, just noise. Later that afternoon, I walked to the library. I couldn't stand the sound of the house anymore, its fake calm, its bad insulation, holding in more history than heat. I wandered the aisles until I reached nonfiction, self-help, divorce, boundaries, codependency, trauma recovery. I reached for a worn paperback titled Breaking Family Contracts. The subtitle read, How to Heal When They Don't Want to Change. I tucked it under my arm and checked it out without saying a word. In the back corner of the library, near the computers, I heard my name. My full name, Danika's voice. Kaylin? She's kind of high-strung, makes everything a drama. I stopped mid-step, peeked around the shelf. She lives off her family, but acts like a martyr, she added, laughing softly. I didn't confront her. What would be the point? She wasn't talking to me. She was performing for someone else. I pulled out my phone, found her contact, and deleted it. That was enough. Some friends are just audience members in disguise. Back at home, I slipped into my room, left the book on my nightstand, and opened my journal. I wrote, I'm not rewriting the ending anymore. I'm erasing the script. The sun was setting by the time I felt like I could breathe again. I laid back on the bed, feeling something solid in the softness of the mattress for the first time. My phone rang. I answered without looking at the caller ID. Miss Holloway, this is Internal Affairs from Redwood Credit. We'd like to schedule a meeting, in person. My stomach didn't drop. My chest didn't tighten. I just exhaled. Turns out, when you stop being silent, people start whispering louder. The yelling started before I even left my bedroom. Corliss's voice echoed down the hallway, sharp and frantic, cut with static from the speakerphone. I don't understand. How can the mortgage be invalid without her signature? I cracked the door just enough to see Jolene pacing, one hand on her hip, the other flipping through papers like she expected the answer to fall out and fix itself. Wendell stood by the window, arms crossed, saying nothing. I turned away before they noticed me and shut the door behind me, slow and deliberate. They didn't notice when I signed the papers. Now they notice because I walked away. Back in my room, my inbox had a new email. Cosigner removal confirmed. Mortgage terms voided. Minutes later, Corliss was pounding on my door. Not knocking, pounding. You need to fix this, she shouted. You're putting us all in danger. I opened the door, leaned against the frame. Calm. No, I said. You put yourself there the second you decided I was your backup plan, not your daughter. Her mouth opened, but I didn't give her time to speak. Being family isn't a subscription you auto-renew. You can't just charge me without consent and call it love. I closed the door again. This time, she didn't knock twice. Wendell tried next. We'll figure it out together, he said, voice lower, like a man trying to sound reasonable, without realizing how far past reasonable we were. I looked at him through the crack in the door. "You had 2 years to figure it out," I replied. "I was your solution. Now you face the equation." Then I grabbed my keys and walked out of the house without another word. At the cafe downtown, I ordered coffee I didn't really want and found a table in the back where I could watch the door. Not for anyone specific, just out of habit. I needed the space, the air, something that didn't smell like desperation or Febreze. I opened my phone and saw Jolene had gone live again. This time, she was crying. "She just started pulling away. We tried to be there, but she shut us out," she told her followers. "We're family, and she's tearing it apart." Comments came fast. "You're just mad she stopped letting you drain her." "She paid your bills and you gave her a crown?" "We saw the receipts. We saw the crown. We know who the disappointment really is." I saved the stream, screenshotted every top comment, not for vengeance, for memory. They tried to turn it into a circus. I built the tent, now I burn it. I opened Instagram, uploaded a single photo, no captioned breakdown, no hashtags, just a snapshot of the spreadsheet I'd emailed them days ago. The caption? "My silence paid for your comfort. That lease has expired." I didn't tag anyone, didn't wait for likes. I closed the app and leaned back, letting the bitter espresso settle on my tongue. I didn't need a crowd, I needed peace. The phone buzzed again, a new message, from Avis. Subject, good. Now let's tell the rest of the truth. The email from Avis landed in my inbox mid-afternoon, just as I finished rechecking the freeze notice on the joint savings account. Her subject line was plain, no more silence. The body was even shorter. "Just saw Jolene's stream. I've held my tongue long enough. I'm not doing it anymore." 2 minutes later, I got the screenshot. Avis had commented directly under Jolene's livestream. No anonymity, no filters. "Kaylin was the only adult in that house. You just didn't like the mirror she held up." That comment detonated everything. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was screaming into a void. One by one, the tide in the comment section shifted. Strangers, old neighbors, former classmates, people I barely remembered, chimed in. "I remember Kaylin walking Corliss to dialysis every Thursday. Didn't she cover Jolene's first year at college?" Funny how the only one not speaking publicly is the one who actually paid for everything. Jolene tried to shut down the comments, but it was too late. People were already sharing clips, screenshots, receipts I hadn't even posted yet. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. The truth doesn't need volume, just visibility. I scrolled Jolene's page. Her follower count dropped in real time. The curated aesthetic, sunny brunches, wellness quotes, and makeup tutorials now had comments like, "You should apologize, not monetize." This isn't transparency, it's projection. Meanwhile, Corliss had started texting extended family. "Please don't take sides," she wrote to one cousin. "This is a private matter." But the screenshots were already on group chats, and no amount of guilt tripping was going to make people unsee the truth. Receipts always resurface. That evening, I was sitting in the library's back corner when my phone buzzed again. Avis had sent me a video file. It took a moment to load, and when it did, I sat there frozen. It was footage from an old camcorder, dated, grainy, a birthday party in someone's backyard. I was 8 years old, standing in front of a cake. Jolene, 6 at the time, was crying because she didn't get the corner slice. I handed her mine. The camera caught Corliss laughing, saying, "She always knows how to keep the peace." The footage ended there. Avis had added one line of text beneath the file name. "She's been cleaning up after you since she was in single digits." I posted the video on Facebook. No caption, no context. Within an hour, it was everywhere. The comment that stuck with me came from a retired teacher I hadn't seen since middle school. "Not everything needs a mic. Some things just need memory." And still, despite the vindication, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steadier, not happy, not sad, just less tilted. Justice doesn't always come with joy. Sometimes it's just a quieter kind of breathing. I walked back home. The sticky note I had taped to the fridge 2 weeks ago was still there. If you need help, ask someone you respect. No one had touched it. I was pouring a glass of water when my phone rang. I knew the number before I saw the screen. Avis, I answered. Her voice was calm, no anger, no excitement, just steady. Are you ready to tell them everything? Not just what they did, but who you are now? I didn't answer right away. I looked at the note again, then out the window, where the yard still held the dent from the party tent. I exhaled. Slow, because surviving them isn't the story. Becoming myself is. I sat in the kitchen, slowly stirring my coffee, as if the movement might settle something inside me. The silence in the house felt different now, not the kind that came from avoidance or apathy. It was the quiet of people scrambling behind doors, whispering into phones, trying to keep a dam from cracking. Jolene hadn't left her room. Corliss was on the phone again, her voice low and sharp, pacing from kitchen to hallway like a prosecutor prepping for trial. Wendell stood in the corner, with his arms crossed, staring blankly at the dining room window, his phone lit up in his palm but untouched. You can hear people scrambling, even when they're whispering. I took a sip and walked toward the hallway, just in time to hear Corliss through the slightly open door. No, she never co-signed anything officially, but we can't just let her withdraw all that. That's not how this works. Then Wendell, finally speaking up. We need to apologize. Before this gets out of hand. I leaned on the doorframe, letting the words soak in before stepping into view. It's already out of hand, I said, voice calm. You're just now feeling the burn. Corliss froze. Wendell looked at me like he was seeing someone else entirely. Maybe he was. I didn't stay long. I didn't need another debate about who did what, or who owed who. I already had the data, the timestamps, the receipts. The truth didn't need repetition. It needed boundaries. A few hours later, I heard a soft knock on my door. Then another. When I opened it, Wendell stood there, not slouched, not defensive, just still. I didn't know, he said. About everything. I should have paid more attention. I didn't respond. I waited. He hesitated, then added, I saw your spreadsheet. I saved it. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. The first time he'd acknowledged me, not as the difficult daughter, but as the person holding the weight no one else wanted to see. You did know, I said. You just chose not to weigh it. He nodded slowly. And that was all. Recognition is louder when it's whispered by someone who never spoke. Back at my desk, I opened my notebook and wrote one sentence. I don't want revenge. I just want the lie to stop breathing. I started listing everything that still tied me to them, bills, property, documents, and began outlining the steps to legally cut each one loose. Love without boundaries becomes debt. Downstairs, I heard a door slam. Jolene. She stormed into the living room, tossing her phone onto the couch. I just lost a brand deal. They said I'm too controversial. You ruined everything. I stepped in, calm as ever. No, I stopped funding the fantasy. That's different. Corliss tried to intervene, arms out like a referee between boxers. We need to breathe, all of us. No one's the enemy here. I looked at her and shook my head. I'm not here to fix it. I was never the one breaking it. Later that night, as I folded laundry, an envelope slid quietly under my door. Inside was a handwritten note. Wendell's handwriting, slanted and careful, like he'd rewritten it 3 times. I'm sorry it took public shame for me to say something private. I sat with it for a long time, tracing the curve of his signature like it was some forgotten artifact of affection. But even a late truth is still a truth. The note still sat on my desk, untouched, since Wendell had slipped it under my door. I'd read it 3 times now, the handwriting shaky, uneven, like he wasn't sure which words would land right, or maybe like he was writing while still unsure whether they should be written at all. I'm sorry it took public shame for me to say something private. I didn't cry. I just pinned it above my desk next to the final invoice I had sent them all 2 weeks earlier. 2 pieces of paper, one full of numbers, the other of admission. Both confessions, one financial, one human. I sat down and opened the manila folder I'd labeled Exit Plan. Inside, printed screenshots, property paperwork, account logs, contact info for a lawyer a friend had used during her divorce. I added a sticky note at the top. Not about revenge, just rights. It wasn't some impulsive move. I'd been thinking about this for months, maybe years, just never seriously enough to say it out loud. I wrote out my list. Remove name from house deed, close joint savings, freeze access to any remaining shared credit, cancel the auto pay on everything, open a P.O. box so I could stop dreading the mail. I pulled out my phone and called the lawyer. Hi, this is Kaylin Holloway. I was referred to you by Dina Abrams. I'm not going through a divorce, but I need to sever legal ties with some family members. She asked a few follow-ups, then said, "Let's set a time to talk this week." Before hanging up, I added, "It's weird. I'm not married, but I feel like I've been divorced from my worth for a long time." That night, I walked the house one last time before bed. The hallway was dark, but I didn't turn the lights on. I didn't want the glare, just the quiet. The family photo wall was still there, perfectly intact. My face in those frames had started to fade from sun exposure, washed out, like an afterthought. I didn't take the photos down. I didn't need to. I used to want to be seen. Now, I just wanted to stop shrinking. Back in my room, I pulled out my flash drive and copied everything over. Receipts, emails, voicemails, even the birthday video. I labeled the folder. For me, not court. Proof isn't always for defense. Sometimes it's for closure. I placed the drive inside my lockbox next to my birth certificate, shut the lid, and breathed. Then I wrote a letter. Not to them. To myself. You kept them afloat. They called you dramatic. You bled into the cracks. They painted over you. Now you walk. You don't burn bridges. You just don't rebuild what was never steady. I folded the letter, tucked it into the back of my journal, and left it unsigned. The email hit just past midnight. Subject, final title transfer appointment confirmed, Friday 11 a.m. I stared at it for a few seconds, then leaned back in my chair. That would be the last thing with my name on their mess. The exit wasn't dramatic. It was deliberate. The title office smelled like stale coffee and toner. I sat across from a notary who barely looked at me as she stamped the final document that removed my name from the family mortgage. Her pen moved with mechanical efficiency, like this was just another day, another signature. But for me, it was the first time I'd signed something for myself, not because someone asked, but because I was finished. They once said I held the family together. Turns out, I just held the keys. No one showed up. No Corliss. No Wendell. Definitely not Jolene. It was just me and a stranger stamping the end of an era. I left the building without looking back. The sun felt too bright, like it had been waiting to see if I'd finally open my eyes. As I crossed the parking lot, my phone buzzed 3 times in a row. Corliss. "Call me, we need to discuss this." Corliss again. "You didn't even give us a chance." I stared at the messages, then hit block. No anger, no grand exit, just disconnection. Sometimes closure looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like paperwork. I walked 2 blocks to the cafe, with decent Wi-Fi, and took a seat in the corner near the window. I opened my laptop and logged into my social media, an account I hadn't touched in months. My profile picture was still from last year's Thanksgiving, a forced smile with Jolene cropping me halfway out. I uploaded a photo, my final invoice spreadsheet. The caption was short. "Trick candles only look pretty until you realize they never blow out. Here's everything I paid while being labeled the family disappointment." I didn't tag anyone. No names, just facts. No rage, just receipts. It took 5 minutes for the post to catch traction, 10 for it to spread, a few shares, then hundreds, then thousands. You said what many of us never could. My mom made me pay rent at 15 and still called me ungrateful. Blood doesn't make it safe. The comments kept pouring in. Stories from people I'd never met, strangers who had walked variations of my path. Jolene tried to do damage control. She posted a story with her usual curated lighting and makeup on point. Family shouldn't air dirty laundry. Corliss commented underneath one post shared by a mutual friend. We all made mistakes, but this is excessive. I didn't respond. Instead, I added one pinned comment under my own post. Laundry only smells when it's left dirty too long. Later that evening, a message popped up from Avis. You did it. But remember, your truth isn't just a weapon, it's a door. You get to walk through it now. I typed back, then I'm walking. I closed my laptop and slid my flash drive into my backpack. There was one last thing I needed to do. I opened the drawer at the bottom of my desk, the one I hadn't touched in weeks, and pulled out the paper crown. Still intact, still glittered. King of disappointment. I held it in both hands, not with anger, but with recognition. Time to return what never belonged to me. I slipped the crown into my tote bag and zipped it closed. The plastic points scratched faintly against the lining, like it was resisting its own burial. I didn't give it the satisfaction of hesitation. I grabbed my keys, a folder with the last of my receipts, and stepped out the door. The drive to the house was familiar but sterile. No music, no daydreams, just the hum of the engine and the quiet certainty of finishing something I should have left undone years ago. I pulled into the driveway slowly. Their cars were there. I hadn't expected that. My plan was to slip in, grab a box I left in the back closet, and walk out before anyone noticed. But of course, the universe always has a flair for the inconvenient. I stepped inside, and the air felt heavier than usual, like a pause waiting to be broken. The living room was quiet. Only the ticking wall clock moved. I headed toward the hallway when I heard Corliss's voice from the kitchen. You came back. I turned toward her, voice steady. Only for what's mine, and one thing that never should have been. From behind her, Jolene emerged with her arms crossed and eyebrows raised. If you're here to make a scene, just know no one's clapping anymore. I shook my head. I'm not here for an audience. I'm here for closure. I walked past them without waiting for permission, opened the cabinet near the sideboard, and pulled out the glittery crown. It was exactly as I remembered it. Cheap, smug, and covered in gluey red sparkles. You called it a joke, then a tradition, then harmless, I said, turning it slowly in my hands. But this thing carried more truth than you meant it to. No one stopped me as I stepped outside into the backyard. I walked to the fire pit, the same one we used for summer s'mores and forced laughter. I dropped the crown inside, then struck a match and let it fall. It caught quickly, curling in on itself like even it was embarrassed by its meaning. Some stories need ash. I didn't flinch. I didn't explain. I stood there, letting the heat touch my face as the plastic warped and cracked. Behind me, I heard the door creak open. This won't change what people think, Corliss said, arms crossed. It already has, I replied. I just needed to change what I believed. Jolene scoffed from the patio. So now you're what? Some martyr? I turned slowly. No, I'm just no longer the joke. Neither of them spoke. For once, I didn't fill the silence. I walked past them and back through the living room, ignoring the photo wall with its curated smiles. I'd waited my whole life for them to listen. But the truth is, I never needed their ears. I just needed my own voice. I grabbed the last box from my old bedroom closet, one with a stack of old journals, some childhood sketchbooks, and the mug I'd always used for tea. Nothing valuable to anyone but me. I didn't cry. I didn't linger. I didn't even check for dust. I stepped outside, closed the front door behind me, and exhaled. I didn't burn the house. I burned the illusion that it was ever mine. On the drive back into town, I didn't take the highway. I took the back roads, the ones I used to ride my bike through as a kid, thinking they led somewhere exciting. Now I knew they led away from lies. I parked in front of a small independent bookstore downtown. Something about it felt right. Familiar but unclaimed. On the community bulletin board near the cash register was a flyer printed on bright paper. Open mic night. Share your story. This Friday. All voices welcome. I stared at it for a moment, then reached for it, folded it carefully, and tucked it into my jacket pocket. Some truths aren't meant to be whispered anymore. I walked out of the bookstore with the flyer still warm in my jacket pocket, like it carried more weight than paper should. I didn't go straight home. Instead, I wandered for an hour, past storefronts I hadn't noticed in years, letting the silence do what words couldn't. By the time I arrived at the cafe, the sky had folded into soft orange. A chalkboard out front announced open mic night tonight. Inside, fairy lights dangled over bookshelves and mismatched chairs. The host greeted me with a smile and a clipboard. Still got one spot left if you want it. I nodded. No hesitation. Signed my name. Kaylin M. Last on the list. Fitting. I took a seat in the back, the paper crown tucked in my bag, burnt edges still brittle from the fire pit. I rested my hand over it briefly, then focused on each voice that went before me. Poems about grief, songs about lost dads, a man who stuttered through a love letter to himself. Then the host called my name. I stood. No hand tremor, no throat catch. I stepped onto the tiny stage and pulled the folded crown from my bag, holding it like a relic. On my 20th birthday, I said, my family gave me a crown. It read, King of Disappointment. A murmur rippled through the audience. No laughter. They planned it for a week, laughed when they placed it on me, called it a joke, then a tradition, then harmless. I took a breath, and 3 days later, they apologized. Quietly, privately. But by then, I had already stopped paying their bills, and their narrative. You could hear a spoon fall into a teacup in the corner. That's how quiet it was. I wasn't angry I paid, I said. I was angry they pretended I didn't. I never wanted thanks. I just didn't want to be erased. I reached into my coat and unfolded a single sheet. The spreadsheet. My final invoice. My proof. I brought the record, not for revenge, for truth. I clipped it to the mic stand. Someone clapped. Then another. Then the whole room. I stepped down without bowing. I didn't need affirmation. I already had clarity. Outside, the air felt gentler. A woman in her 60s approached, silver curls tucked behind her ears. She looked like someone who'd held too many things in for too long. Thank you, she said, her voice soft but sure. I divorced a whole family last year. No court involved, just boundaries. We hugged once, brief, no names exchanged. Sometimes, I told her, the people who hear you best were never supposed to share your last name. She smiled and walked away. Later that night, curled in bed with the cafe still buzzing in my chest, I checked my phone. A single message from Jolene blinked on the screen. You really had to go public? I stared at it a moment, then typed back. No. I had to go free. I deleted the thread. Not with anger, with understanding. Closure isn't clean, it's just quiet. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed against the darkness, cursor blinking in rhythm with my breath. I clicked on a blank blog draft and typed the title, Things I Paid For and the Things I Let Go. I didn't write another word, not yet. But the door was open. The cursor blinked, but I didn't write anything more. I closed the laptop, folded the flyer from the cafe back into my pocket, and let the silence settle. 1 week later, the silence was still here, but now it felt earned. I opened the blinds in my new studio apartment in Fayetteville. Light spilled across bare wood floors. No background noise, no footsteps overhead, no arguing behind doors I didn't own. Just me, a chipped coffee mug, and sunlight resting on the spines of books I'd chosen for myself. The kitchen was small, but it was mine. A calendar hung beside the fridge, with no birthdays circled, no bills pinned. Just open squares waiting for new decisions. Freedom doesn't announce itself. It waits. Patient, steady. I didn't notice it arrive. I only realized it had been here when I stopped holding my breath. One box sat untouched in the corner. I knelt and pulled the tape loose. The label, "Loose Ends." Inside was the flash drive, tucked in a velvet pouch. The burned edge of the crown I hadn't tossed after the cafe reading. And a photo, one I didn't remember packing, of me at 10, smiling beside Corliss, Wendell, and Jolene. We were all in focus, all pretending. I looked at it for a long time. Not with rage, just distance. "I don't miss the people," I whispered. "I miss the version of me that thought they'd protect her." I didn't hang the photo. I slid it into the back of a drawer. Later, I sat by the window with my journal open and pen poised, but no script in mind. I wasn't writing for memory anymore. I was writing to let go. "This isn't about forgiving them," I wrote. "It's about forgiving myself for believing silence was safer than truth." There were things I had to grieve. The story I told myself about what love was supposed to look like, the ache of being the one no one chose outright, and the small, relentless hope that someone would have seen me before I had to see myself. And still, I was proud. "Sometimes the only justice you get," I wrote, "is living in peace." Mid-afternoon, I opened my inbox. Buried between newsletters and spam was a message titled, "Thank you." It was from a woman in Ohio. She had read my blog post and said she'd left a toxic family home after 3 decades. Her words weren't grand, but they were sharp and brave. "You helped me realize I wasn't crazy," she wrote. "Just conditioned." I replied without overthinking. "We're not broken. We were just bending in the wrong direction for too long." The rest of the day moved slowly, like a page turn you didn't rush. I gathered a copy of the final spreadsheet and slid it into an envelope. On the front, I wrote, "For the next girl who thinks it's her job to keep everyone else breathing." At a quiet park, I found a little free library beside a swing set. I placed the envelope inside, nestled between dog-eared romance novels and outdated cookbooks. Not everyone would find it, but someone would. That evening, I came home as dusk softened the windows. I didn't turn on music. I didn't open social media. I sat on the floor, legs crossed, sipping coffee that had gone cold. And still, I felt warm. They had called me a disappointment, over and over. Turns out, I just disappointed their illusion.